I'd like to ask everybody to please take their seats. Could I ask everyone to take their seats, please? Majority and minority leaders. And I'm going to have the town clerk please do the roll call.
David Becker. Here. Michael Hurley. Here. Gaylord Meyer. Here. Carolyn Richmond. Here. Eric Sunman. Pete Ambrose. Here. Amy Jennings. Here. John Matola. Here. Jeff Steele.
Here.
Keith Varian. Here. Ed Bateson. Here. Tom Conley. Here. Hank Ferentz. Here. Dave McKenzie. Here. Mary McCullough. Here. Heather Dean. Present. Joe DiMartino. Art Hugg. Amy Mezoff. Here. Joe Palmer. Here. Matt Ambrose. Here. Josh Garskoff. Here. Chris McAleese. Here. Ruth Smay. Here. Ann Stamler. Here. Chris Brogan. Here. Laura Campbell. Here. Julie Gottlieb. Here. Sheila Marmion. Here. Jay Walk. Here. Jen Hochberg. Here. Kevin Hopkins. Here. Eric Newman. Here. Mark Patton. Here. Hal Schwartz. Here. Kathy Braun. Here. Dana Carey. Here. Alan Marks. Here. Tom McCarthy. Here. Jeff Stopa. Bill D'Amica. Joe Fellner. Here. Ellen Jacob. Here. Nick Marabli. Present. Carol Pontrelli. Here. Chuck Abercrombie. Here. Lee Hannum. Here. Ken Lee. Here. Bruce Ryan. Here. Carol Way.
Welcome, everyone. We have a packed agenda tonight. As this body's not met since July, as you know, so we've had a long summer off of RTM business, which has been nice. But tonight we have a lot of matters to address, so we're going to have a busy agenda, and we have to move on with business as the fall now begins. But before that, I'd first like to ask the members of the Fairfield American Little League team to come up in front of the room here. You guys can just line up here. You can all be seated for a moment. It was only 2 years ago that the Fairfield American Little League team, with Coach Chris Daly and a group of young baseball players with the likes of Nick Nardone and Eddie Maggi, who became almost household names in this town, represented Connecticut and New England in the 2010 Little League World Series in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, with an impressive showing. And here we are again, only 2 years later, doing the same thing, with a new bunch of equally gifted kids. These are all probably familiar faces and at least household names in their own right, mentioned over and over on TV and throughout the newspaper. The Fairfield American 12's Little League team took the baseball world by storm again this year and went the furthest that any Connecticut team has gone in the Little League World Series since Trumbull in 1989. Having made the semifinals of the U.S. section of the World Series, was a tremendous accomplishment for all of you in baseball here in Fairfield. How do they do it year after year, one might ask? This team of young men has won the state title for the last 3 years when they were 10, 11, and 12, and you can only surmise that in addition to excellent coaching, the years of playing together has gelled this team and has also created a mindset of winning and a tradition of success that has built Fairfield into a baseball powerhouse, arguably one of the best baseball towns in the East Coast. It's truly amazing. The team has been honored and acknowledged by nationally, regionally, statewide, and throughout the town, having appeared at the Board of Selectmen meeting just last week. I thought it would be equally appropriate to have this team here tonight and on Live Fair TV to be honored once again, this time by the legislative body of our town. As I read your names, please raise your hand so everyone knows who you are, if they don't already. Coaches, I believe Bill Murray is not here tonight. TJ Paoletta, John Lucas, coaches, and then I'll read the players. Maddie Clarkin, Michael Jorzy, Danny Kiernan. Matt Kubel was not able to attend tonight. Will Lucas, Ryan Murie, Chris Myers, Kevin Oracoli, Biagio Paoletta, Henry Prestegard, and Patrick Steed. Congratulations to all of you. This was a summer that gave you a lifetime experience and a memory that you'll be able to talk about for decades from now, and certainly bragging rights for the town. We're all proud of you and your accomplishments and for representing Fairfield, New England with such poise and grace and respect for the game and your success. Your dedication, perseverance, and hard work paid off, and you've become role models for a town full of young baseball players. So let's give the team one more hand. Congratulations to all of you. But we have one more thing we have to do, and you actually have to lead the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you guys could all just together lead the Pledge of Allegiance, the flag over there, we can move forward with this. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And if you just stay standing for one moment, and as we do, I ask you to keep in your thoughts Justin Hervey of Armonk, New York, who was involved in the tragic car fire at Tunxus Baseball Field earlier this month and is still clinging to life at Bridgeport Hospital. Thanks. You be seated. Thanks again, guys. Since we haven't met in a couple months, there are a couple housekeeping items I need to go over. One of which is I'd like to ask Jim Gallagher to come up. Jim asked if he could have a couple of minutes. Jim, as you know, is chairman of the Penfield Pavilion Building Committee, and he wanted to have a couple minutes for a wrap-up of the Penfield Pavilion and a quick update or concluding remarks. So I want to give the microphone to Jim.
Thanks, Jeff. Jim Gallagher, I was chairman of the Penfield Building Committee. I wanted to, on behalf of our committee, thank the RTM for your support in this project. We have completed our tasks, and the Board of Selectmen last week or 2 weeks ago dissolved the building committee. We're very, very proud of the building, and I hope everybody here enjoys it. I was hoping that some of our members, one of our members is here, Linda is here. I think it's important that the RTM just has an idea of who helped to do all of this work. Mike Galley was my vice chair. Linda Crowley, as most of you know, was secretary. John Convertito, Patty Dyer, Kathleen Griffin, Ken Jones, Al Kelly, Jay Pesci, and Ellery Plotkin. We've finished the project on time and under budget. We never had to come back and ask for any money. There was about $12,000 left, and our committee decided to take that money and give it to the Parks and Rec Commission in their revolving account to help pay for a commemorative plaque. And I'm trying to remember, what was the other point that we wanted them to spend the money on? I'm sorry. Yeah, there was beach grass, but there was something else. Oh, the acoustic tiles. One of the complaints that we've had with the building, unfortunately during the construction process we had considered it, but we had a very tight budget, was something to help out with the acoustics in the building. So the Board of Parks and Recreation have agreed to tackle that. It's their building, so whatever money was left in our account, we've turned it over to Parks and Rec to hopefully defray the cost of what's going to be done. But enjoy the building, and thank you for all your support.
Thank you, Jim. I also was asked by Representative Marks for a moment as well, so I'm going to allow that right now.
Good evening. I was asked by Larry Cayley to hand out this postcard, which you all see in front of you. Larry is on the Fairfield Clean Energy Task Force. He's the chair of Fairfield Earth Day, and he's a former RTM member like we. And Larry just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that Fairfield was selected as a pilot, part of a pilot town in the state of Connecticut for this Solarize program. And the idea here is to get solar panels on as many roofs in town as possible. The more people that sign up for it, the lower the price goes for everyone. And the more people who sign up, the more Fairfield receives credit so that we receive free solar panels on some of our municipal buildings. And we actually have already received on three of our buildings, we have solar panels that were put up for free. In fact, just since I handed this card out, two different members of our body have already told me that they have people coming to check out, to evaluate their homes, and others have expressed interest as well. There are 2 workshops that are planned where you can get more information on this, so I wanted you to be aware of that in case you get questions from your constituents or for the general public as well. There is a workshop scheduled for Wednesday, October 10th at the Fairfield Woods Branch Library from 6:30 to 8. That's Wednesday, October 10th, Fairfield Woods Library at 6:30, and Monday, October 22nd at the Pequot Library from 7 to 8:30. And there'll be people there to answer any questions if you have them. Thank you very much.
One other thing I just wanted to bring up before we start everything else is to make note of this incident at Tonksys that does deserve mentioning. And I just want to say most of you probably know the story, which is still under investigation. But what the incident with the burning car did show was the teamwork and efficiency of all those involved, the police and fire rescue services, and several citizens who were coaching baseball at the time of the game. Those 5 coaches I do want to name: Brian Stanton, Vinny Giacomazza, Jim Carolyn, John Pierce, and Peter Perazzo. Their instinctive and immediate efforts to save someone's life were heroic and selfless, especially as they put themselves in danger. It was their help that gave Mr. Hervey his best chance to survive. Equally telling, the efforts of all those involved, including the school system and their communication and counseling efforts, demonstrated the compassion shown for the kids who witnessed this horrible event and how they rose up and met the challenge before them. On that note, I was also told that on October 2nd, the fire and police departments will hold their annual Public Safety Awards night at Ludlow Middle School at 6:30, and they will, I believe, mention these coaches as sort of heroes of the town, and they certainly deserve that. Now, getting on to business, we'll move to item number 2, to consider and act upon the minutes of the regular monthly meeting held on July 23rd, 2012. Are there any proposed amendments or revisions to any of these minutes from the body? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve? Representative Richmond and Representative Hochberg, second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The minutes pass. Next is the consent calendar. This month there were no items on consent, as I believe it was Ed and Rec who did not have a quorum. Moving on to item number, yes, Representative Becker.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. David Becker, District 1. I'd like to make a motion that we move item number 6 to be after after item number 2, and following that to take up item number 4 immediately after item number 6.
So the motion is to waive the rules, take the items out of order so that we take up item number 6 first, and then item number 4 in that order, and then proceed along the same course. Second by Representative Schwartz. We do need 2/3 votes. We need 31 people to approve this, so we go back to our standard order. And there's some reasoning behind this. So we'll just see, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, raise your hand. Abstentions? Okay. So we will now move on to item number 6, to consider and act upon the following resolution recommended by the First Selectman. Resolved that a certain contract negotiated by and between the Town of Fairfield and Fairfield Public Health Nurses, Unit 34 of the Federation of Nurses and Health Professionals, Connecticut State Federation of Teachers, American Federation of Teachers, AFL-CIO, concerning conditions of employment, is that right? For a period commencing July 1st, 2010 and ending July 30, 2014, be and hereby is ratified. This item was given to every committee. Do I have a motion to approve? Representative Smay, second. Representative Lee. We will now go to a recounting of the committee votes. L&A, there were 7 members present. Representative DiMartino, Varian, and Brogan were absent. The vote was 5 in favor and 2 abstentions. Representative Becker and Braun. Finance, 8 members were present. Representatives Ryan and Jacob were absent. Vote was all 8 in favor. Public Works and Planning, 7 members were present. Representatives Carey, Connolly, and McAleese were absent. Vote was 3 in favor with 4 abstentions. I don't have the list of those who abstained. Public Health and Safety, 6 members were present. Representatives Hugg, Meyer, Domikas, and Smay were absent. Vote was 5 in favor and 1 abstention. Representative Matt Ambrose. And then Education and Recreation, no vote was taken as there was no quorum. We're now going to have discussion among the body. We also have Attorney Pat McHale here for questions, and if anyone prefers for him to recap it, they're welcome to ask for it, but right now I'll open it up to the body. Yes, Representative Meyer.
Gaylord Meyer, District 1. I just have one question. When I was reading defined contributions to the 401, it says here the town long-term disability benefits for permanent and total disability of the employee will be provided through insurance at the rate of 50% of the salary. What is the length of this term, or the term length of that, of the long-term disability? Is that life? Is it, if they are, yeah, let's answer the question.
Long-term disability policies run to 65.
Thank you, because that was not in here. Thank you.
Any other members? Representative Palmer.
Joe Palmer, District 4. I'm not actually sure who to ask this of. Maybe through the moderator to the First Selectman. On the 3rd page of the Hooker and Holcomb report, titled Town of Fairfield Employees Retirement System, there's a comparison between our current plan and the plan that would be installed for new hires. And there's a breakout of the new plan. It says 4% is the town contribution, and 1.8% is the 50% of the salary disability benefit. But there's no breakout of the current plan. And I was wondering if we can get an explanation of how we arrived at 10% of the town's. Is this per employee? Maybe you can just take us through how that number has been derived for selectmen or.
Hooker and Holcomb is our actuary, and they have all the information, ages, length of service, expected dates of retirement. So they run a study for us so we can give you a report based on this particular union. And they said that the current plan costs 10.2% of salary per year, and that the new plan, we're going to a 401 and a long-term disability policy, will cost 5.8. as part of the provision of the current DB plan or defined benefit plan, they have long-term disability as part of that if they meet the provisions of permanent and totally disabled. And so the numbers come from them based on actual ages. And in this particular union, they're all female, so it's the entire package they run.
I just think there really isn't a lot of detail here in terms of what the variables are. And I just want to get an understanding of, is it the market value of our fund? I know there's some, you had mentioned that the longevity of some of our employees, but would we be able to get at some point a detailed summary of, what some of the levers are? Or maybe just an explanation from our,
I guess the answer is yes.
yeah, great.
Yeah, Mr. Ryder's here for the other agenda item, but he's with Hook and Oakland, so he's...
You want to just...
Maybe you can comment on that? Sure. Seems like you have some, maybe some answers.
Well, I mean, I think Mary Carroll did a good job of explaining. I mean, there's a lot of assumptions. They're disclosed in the report. Mortality assumptions. There is interest discounting assumptions, and all of the benefits, death benefits, disabilities, are built into that number. With regard to your comment about assets, if I'm remembering the display you're looking at, for union negotiation purposes, you're looking at prospective costs. What is, because when you're talking about the cost of the benefits, and actually we're going to get into this in the comparing DB and DC later in the presentation, unfunded accrued liability, which is what the assets are paying, or they're paying, that's the funded liability, doesn't come into play when you're comparing for union negotiation new hires. New hires don't come on board with any accrued liability, so we look at what is the cost of adding that new entrant compared to Plan A or Plan B. So when we're looking at the cost of the current plan for a new entrant, we're only looking at the cost of the benefits prospectively.
Okay, so it's not essentially it's not calculated based on, let's say, what the town has to contribute towards our pension in that given year?
It is. It's related to, there's this calculation, called the ARC, or the annual required contribution, that has two components. It has something called the normal cost, and that's the assignment of current benefits, and then there's the benefits that are assigned to prior periods that there's assets to fund. Any difference, the unfunded liability, is amortized over a certain period. The sum of those two is what you put in. So if you break it down, now the calculation's done in the aggregate, but if you break it down for a new hire, the new hire's addition to the ARC is that 10% of pay.
Okay.
Or that, at least that's the estimate. There's a lot of assumptions built into that, and there's an actuarial funding method. So there's quite a bit of complexity packed into that number, but it's our best guess of the long-term cost over that participant's career from hire going forward.
Right. Oh, okay, I understand. I guess what I was really trying to look for was that we have increased our contribution into our pension fund over the last few years by a few $1 million each year, and then the ARC changes every year, but the 10% is related to the high cost that or the high contribution we're at right now, correct? So
to get at that, it really goes back to that same point. You have the prospective cost, and then you have the unfunded liability. Most of the increase, and you're in the same shape as a lot of municipalities, the reason the contribution went up is because the unfunded liability went up because of losses in the assets.
Right.
And so that caused the ARC to increase. Before, you were in a surplus position where you had basically overfunding that paid the normal cost. So one way to look at it is new hires, were subsidized by your overfunding.
Right.
Now that that's been taken away, you basically are seeing the full cost of the benefits
Right.
that are provided under the plan.
Right, and this might be answered in the presentation, but
Well, the other presentation is not specific to your plan. It's
Okay.
somewhat generic, though there's a few
Okay.
specifics.
Okay, but if we weren't contributing anything, if we didn't have to contribute anything, this number, I'm just trying to get a sense of what the sensitivity towards the
Well, the
contribution.
benefits cost what they cost. I mean, if you were overfunded and you were paying for them with investment returns, that doesn't change the value of the benefits, and that actually we will go
Right,
into.
okay.
But it's just that you happen to be previously in the good fortune of having a overfunded plan that you could pay for it with investment returns. And again, like so many other municipalities, you're not, that were in that situation and aren't anymore. Now the ARC is the normal cost plus some unfunded liability.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Any other members? Representative Richmond.
Carolyn Richmond, District 1. One of the requests we had from our Education and Rec Committee was that in the future, when we are provided contracts, that we are given a type of executive summary displaying the changes in the contract from old to new. The reason is because as you get a little older, this becomes a little hard to read. And what happened is that on the last, excuse me. Okay. On this page, the summary page, they left off 4%. And so when we were looking at it in committee meeting, we finally found back on page 12 that they did indicate that there'd be 4% increase upon ratification of the contract. But if you're going to this type of page, we would have missed it. So all we had asked is that just to make note that in the future, as they've done for us in the past, if they would give us like an executive summary so we could see what the previous contract was, what the changes were, so we can make sure that we don't miss them, just because we might have declining eyesight. Thank you.
Representative McKenzie.
Dave McKenzie, District, what am I, 3. A question regarding any time we get a union contract to vote on. When we're asked to vote on an increase, I'd like to automatically see 10 years of history for what the increases were and compare it to the CPI, which we haven't had here. Regarding compensation, where possible, I'd like to see a comparison to private sector, which isn't here. On headcount, I'm told this is based on state rules. So I'd like a confirmation that the headcount that we have is based on meeting the state rules, not more. Thank you.
Any other members? We'll go to the public. Any public comment on this contract? Okay, we're going to go back and vote on item number 6. Nurses contract, and we're going to do a voice vote. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, raise your hand. Representative Meyer, Representative McCullough. Abstentions? Representative Brogan. And the item, I'm sorry, Representative Braun as well on the abstention, right? A no? On the no. So the item does pass, the contract passes, the full vote being 42 in favor, 3 against, 42 in favor, 3 against, 1 abstention. Got it. Thank you, Mr. McHale, for coming tonight. We appreciate it. Okay. The next item that we're looking at now is item number 4. Am I correct on that? To hear a report on the pension actuarial study. And I believe we have Bob Malarkey here. I'm sorry? Bob Mayer doing it? Which one are we doing? Bob Mayer. David, we're doing pension actuarial, right? That's what you would, yep. Bob Mayer. I apologize.
Not a problem.
Okay. Actually, let me get my thing out here. Give me a second. Let me sit down. You need this? I'm going to get mine.
All right. Pardon? No. Hello? Can you hear me? Awesome, great. I'm Bob Mayer, for those of you who don't know me. We're here to talk about the implications and designs of the differences between defined benefit plans, defined contribution plans, and hybrid plans. You've already met Tim Ryer, who's a partner, Senior VP with Hooker & Holcomb, who worked with me to put this together. Couple of initial comments. Dealing with pension plans and actuarial science is not really rocket science. Rocket science is based upon the principles of math and physics and sciences. Actuarial plan design is based upon math, science, art, economics, and driven by emotion. So it gets a little bit more confusing. Also, it's important as you listen to the presentation tonight to understand that there's really no straightforward answer to a lot of the questions because, as Tim indicated earlier, it's very complex, and a correct answer for one situation may not be the correct answer for another situation. If you were to compare a specific DB plan with a specific DC plan, defined benefit plan, with the defined contribution plan for one population, and then take the same two plans and apply it to a separate, distinct population. In one situation, the DP plan might cost the employer more, and in the other situation, the DC plan might cost the employer more. So it's very dependent upon the variables related to the population. Those variables are age, how long the people are in their jobs, their wages, how long they work, do they retire early, do they retire late. There's a multiplicity of others. There are 27 slides in this presentation. I did not make copies. I did not want to produce 2,000 pages to bring tonight, but I'm assuming Mr. Steele emailed it out to all the members. Okay, with that, and we're going to piggyback on each other a little bit. I'm starting off. You see the first slide here is basically retirement plan basics. We're going to talk about DB plans. We're going to talk about DC plans. DB is defined benefit, DC defined contribution, and hybrid plans, which is a combination of a defined benefit and a defined contribution plan. We're going to compare the costs, how the costs are defined, how the costs are calculated, and how the costs are funded. We're going to talk about the impact of investment returns. A DC plan, investment returns has a zero impact on the contribution requirements of the employer or the town. DB plan, the investment returns are very significant. For those who have been involved in town government here for a long time or paying attention, you can remember there was a period of time because the investment returns were so high that this town made zero contributions to the retirement plan. I think it was like 7 or 8 or maybe 9 or 10 years. And then, of course, the market tanked, and then, as the gentleman mentioned earlier, who was speaking to the union contract, contributions have gone up significantly. Then we're going to talk about the pros and cons of the DB plan, both from an employer and employee perspective. Same thing for the DB plan, DC plan, and the hybrid plan. And then we're going to talk about what's the right design. And that's kind of a trick question because, as I indicated earlier, Really, there is no right design. What's right for one town, what's right for one employer is not necessarily the best solution for other towns, other employers. Defined benefit plan. That's what we currently have. We have a defined benefit plan. The employer makes a contribution. It's called the ARC, the annual required contribution, into the plan. It's basically an actuarial calculation. The employee usually, generally also contributes to the plan, generally a fixed percentage of his or her salary. The benefits are usually a factor of years of service and average pay and what they call a multiplier. So I think our town plan, the multiplier is 2.275%. So when you retire with the right number of years, basically if you have 20 years in, it's 20 years times that 2.275%. It calculates your retirement. Since the employer, read the last one there, since the employer is providing a lifetime payment based upon a fixed formula, the investment earnings, as I indicated earlier, basically have no impact on the benefits that are paid. DC plan, the employer deposits a fixed percentage of pay into the employee account. The employee also contributes into the account. The employee's account varies with the investment results, and we'll talk about that in the, in the pros and cons a little bit more. The benefits received at retirement, you get the money. You get a lump sum payment. And you can take that, you can investment, you can buy an annuity, you can invest it, you can buy an annuity, you can do whatever you want with it. It's unlike the DC plan, the DB plan, where you have a life stream of pension payments on a monthly basis. The hybrid plan is basically a combination of the two. It gives you some of the benefits of and the disbenefits of each of the other two plans. I think, Tim, you can go from here, and I'll be back.
Find my place here. All right. Well, we wanted to highlight this point, and it was a good intro to some of the points earlier, talking about the cost of a DB plan, and these are going to be generic, not specifically related to your plan, but we wanted to, my understanding of this presentation was an education on what is a defined contribution, what is a defined benefit plan, what are the hybrid plans, what are the pros and cons of all these different kinds of pension designs. And to really understand the benefits, you need to understand how the benefits accrue and the value that's given to the employee. And we talked about before, that value could be paid for by investment returns, but it's very different under a defined benefit plan than a defined contribution plan. Under a defined benefit plan, the value that an employee accrues in any year changes due to three factors: increase in pay, obviously additional service year and one more year of service, and then the factor that's in a DB plan that's not in a defined contribution is this present value based on the investment return. Because you're guaranteeing this future pension, the value of what's earned is contingent on what are you going to assume is going to be paid for by investment returns. So, no, not yet, sorry. If you go. So the final point there hopefully is obvious, that if you earn less return, if less of the benefit is going to be paid for by investment return, then more of it needs to be paid for by the employer. Okay. Now, so what we have here in a future slide is we want to give you a graphical representation so you could kind of visualize what does the accrual pattern of a DC plan look like compared to an equivalent DB plan. And this page here, it's got a lot of words on it. Basically, it's just disclosing that when we get to the later graph, we've got three designs that at the end of the period for this sample participant produce roughly the same lump sum. It's $509,000 if memory serves me. So you have these three different designs that are going to be equivalent, but we wanted to show you what does that look like. Actually, go to the next slide. Actually, I apologize. I got a little ahead of myself. I can't see these slides in the dark here. So we did, and just to give you a little of the background, it was a 2% multiplier, and we're showing the equivalent. Actually, go back. You roll it. This slide will kind of give you the idea of what is happening with those three factors: the change in average pay. So to look at the value, and this will make more sense when we get to the graph, but you have the average pay in the example that's increasing. You have the years of service increasing, so the pension is actually increasing, and then you have one more year of interest earned, so the total present value is going up by that as well. So under the DC, and I think Bob explained this pretty well, the DC, the costs are the cost. It's usually a fixed percent of pay, so a 5% of pay DC plan costs the employer 5% of pay because they're putting that in an account, and the investment earnings are owned by the participant. So the town doesn't win or lose depending on investment return, which is very different from the DB plan, where positive investment returns help the employer, negative investment returns hurt the employer as far as total contributions. And then at the bottom there, the hybrid plan is just a blend of the two. It's a way of maintaining some defined benefit by reducing some of the risks. Okay, the next slide is the one I thought we were on, related to describing the graph on the next page. So if we just go to the next one here. Now this is the one that kind of puts it in perspective for you. The yellow line is hopefully obviously the DC. It is going up. We've assumed this participant's pay is increasing with some salary scale over time, but you see it's gradually going. And the important thing to point out when you're talking about plan design changes is these are equivalent plans, and for the younger person makes out better in the early years in a defined contribution until you eventually reach a crossover point. So the blue line is the equivalent defined benefit, and you see what's happening there with both the increase in interest, the inflationary impact due to the increased salary, and then of course the increase in service. It's a very steep line, so the value of what you earn in a defined benefit plan starts out low, but it eventually catches up and overtakes the defined contribution plan. Again, it's important to point out that at the end of this period of service, the person in the DC plan and the person in the DB plan had the same benefit, the same total value, again, assuming a 7.5% return. We show the green line just as an example of what a hybrid might look like, and not surprisingly, since we did a 50-50, it kind of splits the difference. So what this looks like on the next page, that was the graph on the prior page was the year-by-year accruals. This is the accumulation, and you see under all three of them, again, the DC, you start out ahead, and under all three designs, and this was by design, that they all end up at the same, $509,000 roughly lump sum value at retirement age. But they follow very different accrual patterns, and that needs to be considered when you're talking about any kind of transition from defined benefit to defined contribution. So related to that, we've kind of hit this from different angles and talked a little bit about it already, but wanted to give you some numbers to kind of quantify this of what happens to the town's cost if you actually do earn a different investment return. And just a little background, and in the answer to the earlier question, we kind of went over this, but you have this thing called the ARC, which is the actuarial calculation that's what the town contributes to fund the plan, that has these different components. Under the actuarial method, certain liabilities are assigned to the past, That's compared to the assets. The difference is the unfunded liability. That's amortized. But then there's this forward-looking, that's the assignment of the value of the benefits earned in the current year, and that sometimes that's referred to as the service cost, or more commonly, the normal cost. And when we usually look at the normal cost when we're comparing designs and saying, what does this plan cost going forward? You can't really do anything about the unfunded accrued liability. That's a bill that has to be paid no matter what design you move to. And we'll get to that concept a little bit later in the presentation. So you want to look at the normal cost. But again, under a defined benefit plan, the normal cost varies depending on how much of it you think is going to be paid for by investment returns. So in this case, and actually we have a graph on the next page that shows you the difference. And in the top, you notice, is the same $1.4 million number. That's because under the design, as Bob pointed out when he was describing defined benefit plans, typically municipal defined benefit plans require the employees to contribute something. But that's a fixed percent of pay, very similar to a defined contribution plan. So that number is not going to change based on the investment returns. It's, built into the contracts that it is what it is. And so you see under the three scenarios there, 6.5%, 7.5%, or 8.5%. You see, now right now that the town is moving to the middle 7.5% return, and that's why that one is shown. But you see that the dramatic difference, if more or less of that return is being paid by investment returns, that if you only earn 6.5, the cost goes up considerably. Alternatively, if you earn 8.5, the cost is going to go down. All right, so I'm going to turn it back over to Bob to go over some of the design pros and cons.
Okay, so theoretically at this point we're discussed the basics, the cost functions, the calculations, and the differences in the benefit design. So the point then comes, okay, we understand this, where do we go from here? What do we do? What works better for whom? For the employee, for the employer? So what we're going to do now is we're going to go through the employer's perspective for each of these and the employee's perspective for each of these. So starting with the defined benefit plan, because that's what we currently have, the pros are pretty obvious. The employer benefits, as we've discussed over and over again, from the investment gains. It's a very secure plan. It's a big safety net. So it can be a means, compared to a defined contribution plan, to enhance employee retention or to enhance employee recruitment. And it's also, as actually a question that was brought up with respect to the nurse's contract, it's also in a defined benefit plan, you normally have the disability calculation, the disability insurance factor included in the plan, whereas with the defined benefit contribution plan, I get my B's and C's mixed up, with the defined contribution plan, you have to go outside and shop for disability insurance. The cons from the employee's perspective. The employer bears 100% of the investment risk. There's a potential for future unfunded liabilities. The contributions can be volatile. This town has experienced that. We almost contributed nothing. We actually did contribute nothing, as I mentioned earlier, for several years, and now the contribution has gone up dramatically. The employer bears 100% of the longevity and inflation risk, specifically if it has a COLA. Our plans do have a COLA, a cost of living adjustment after retirement. In today's environment, employees who are looking to maybe move around, people move job to job more in today's economy, and well, maybe not today, but a couple of years ago. But there is more transition in employment. So someone who's thinking of moving, in a couple of years, the employer contribution plan is, gives them a quicker hit, as pointed out when Tim was talking about the contribution curves. So younger employers may not appreciate the benefit of this kind of a plan. And again, we talked about the volatility. Right. Again, from the employee's perspective, the pros: guaranteed life income independent of investment returns, protected against longevity inflation, rewarded for long service, and the ancillary benefits of disability. Cons: employee does not benefit directly from investment gains, benefits are not portable. Employee or contribution plans, the benefits are portable from employer to employer. Employer provided retirement benefits are typically forfeited when the employee contributions are withdrawn. It disproportionately favors longer service. That is, the older people, the younger people don't appreciate that. As you can see, the pros and cons, the employer-employee, kind of the flip side of each other, and sometimes it's difficult to understand the true benefits. Defined contribution plan, employer's cost is a fixed percentage of payroll. Now, it may be higher than the defined benefit plan if the market is going up and the investment returns would take care of some of the contribution, or it may be lower. But the key here is it's fixed. You know what it's going to be. You can budget it in your budget every year for the next 10 years. You know it's 4% of payroll, 5% of payroll, 6% of payroll. So the costs are predictable, and there's no unfunded liabilities resulting from this type of a plan. Benefits are funded throughout the employee's career. Administration costs are typically paid for by the vendor, i.e. the mutual funds, the investment managers who manage the funds, and it's basically a very simple, easy-to-understand plan with respect to union negotiations. From the employer's perspective, the cons: employer does not benefit from investment gains, so not available to reduce costs. Typically requires providing disability. I mean, some of the stuff is repetitious and hinders recruiting efforts. From the employee's perspective, the pros: benefit is easy to understand. Employee can see the value of their account. You get a report every month, every quarter, every year. This is how much money is in your account. This is how much money you get if you leave today. This is going forward. Employee manages their own investment choices. Do I want it in emerging market funds? Do I want it in domestic equity funds? Do I want it in fixed income funds? You know, the employee controls the investment of their dollars. Employee benefits obviously increase with the investment gains. From the employee's perspective, the cons: no guaranteed lifetime income. Employee bears the investment risk as well as the investment gains, obviously. 20% asset drop equals 20% drop in benefits. No guaranteed protection for inflation or longevity. And since account balance is not likely to provide meaningful benefits in the event of death or disability, it's sometimes problematic. The hybrid is basically, as we discussed, has both plans. You have the safety net, you have the guaranteed long-term income of the defined benefit plan, and from the employee side, but this is employer, so let me get back, provides greater flexibility in plan design, provides partial reduction in contribution volatility. The cons, again, reduced benefits in each plan may not be appreciated because you see your defined benefit plan results, the number isn't as big as it would be in a full defined benefit plan. Then from the employee's perspective, which I kind of started out on the other one, I got these flip-flop, so I think it's clear though, and I'll give it back to Tim.
All right, so, you know, when you're doing plan design, you need to, and I think Bob covered this in his intro, I mean, the right plan depends on the answers to these questions, and they might vary by group. So you have to ask yourself, what is affordable? What is the right, and this really goes to that question, is a 10% of pay plan too rich? Should it really be, should we design, so new hires have something that's 7 or 8% of pay? So you need to know what you need that prospective cost to be. What is the risk tolerance? If there's no tolerance for risk, then DB is always the wrong answer because, as we've pointed out, there's always risk involved in a defined benefit plan. From the employee standpoint, what is an adequate, benefit level? What are the employees looking for in the size of the benefit? One of the things we pointed out on the earlier slide, I don't know if we highlighted it, but the advantage of a defined benefit plan, it is an efficient way to provide a certain level of benefits. It's the most cost-effective way of doing that. So if your employees have a certain benefit expectation, whether defined benefit or maybe hybrid might be the right answer. What are the cost-sharing arrangements? How much do you want something 50-50 or should it be 80-20? How much of the cost of the total plan should be paid by the employee versus the employer? And then, are there certain benefits that are necessary for retention and recruitment? Some groups might prefer DB. Some groups actually might move around more and actually prefer a defined contribution plan. There also might be certain ancillary benefits that particular groups are looking for. Disability in particular comes up a lot with public safety workers. Some additional considerations on the next slide. What are the drivers of the cost? Before moving forward to looking at changes, what are the drivers of the cost on the current plan? Is it, is the multiplier big relative to other plans, the COLA, cost-sharing provisions? You want to analyze your current plan to see what are the drivers of the current costs. And again, we talked about this already, but, are there some groups that would prefer a particular design? And you need to answer those questions really before you can move forward and pick. I mean, ultimately, the questions can be restated are, what should employees get, what should it cost, and who should bear the risk? Some final considerations I think it's important to point out, and we've alluded to this already, but any move to DC or any other design, it might just be a pared-down DB plan, if it only applies to new hires, then there's not going to be a lot of short-term savings. Because, one of the big drivers, obviously, the increase in the ARC, as we've discussed, is the unfunded accrued liability. If, new hires don't have accrued liability, so if you do something that only affects new hires, you're not really affecting that component of the cost of your plan. So significant short-term savings can only be achieved when plan design changes impact the current group of covered employees, benefit multiplier, COLA, et cetera. And obviously there's, restrictions on that. And so we wanted to open it up. We do give some examples, but wanted to open it up for questions as well. We give you just a couple examples here of, conclusions you might come to. Employer wants absolutely no investment risk, then you would want a DC plan. I already mentioned that. If employer wants to minimize risk but maintain some level of guaranteed benefit, you might want a hybrid design. And the final one was, and if employer was okay with investment risk, and the focus is on providing the largest guaranteed benefit, then DB would be the right answer.
Thank you. We're going to just open it up to some questions. Representative Ambrose?
Tim, good evening. Peter Ambrose, District 2. Who sets a realistic investment return assumption rate? Who can we rely upon, especially in today's economy, where I'd love to get a 7.5% interest rate on my savings or my investments? Who in town would set that rate for the plan?
I mean, ultimately we have to sign off on it. I mean, a couple of things that are important to point out there, that it is a long-term rate. So we look at, when we validate...
long-term based over how many years?
20 plus at least, usually 30 years. So we're looking at what is achievable. So when we look at like capital market expectations and your current asset mix, We combine those to validate the result, but ultimately the town, in association with the plan's investment advisors, has to come up with what they think they can achieve.
Do you look to other municipalities to assess what rate they're using?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the plan just did an experience study. It looked at a bunch of assumptions, but one of them was the investment return, and there has been a move to drop that down. You were at 8, moved down to 7.75, and as I understand it, there's, might be action to move it 7.5 going forward.
Well, I saw that in the most recent
Right.
contract, yeah, but do you perceive that dropping further in the next year as things, as the economy essentially isn't getting much better?
Well, again, these are long-term averages, expectations. What some municipalities are looking at least I have one client that is looking at, maybe we should use kind of a select and ultimate assumption, one rate for the next 10 years and something thereafter because of current market conditions. And that's really the concern, is that when people look at those assumptions and see 7.5%, I think even investment advisors are not coming up with those results in the short term. But most of them will say over a 30-year period that they are achievable over the long haul.
Thank you.
Any other members? Yes, Representative McCarthy.
Tim, quick question. On your model, I saw 3 curves converging. You mentioned later on you included, somewhere incorporated a longevity risk, which obviously applies to the defined benefit but not to the contribution. How did you model that in, or did you, or just assume the aggregate they'd be equal and take them out of the equation?
Yeah, in both the defined benefit and the hybrid example that had some pension in it, there was a mortality table that arrived at that present value. So that $509,000 was the present value of that pension using 7.5% investment return, but also with a mortality table built in. So there is that present value has a mortality table that comes up with the $509,000.
Right, but you assumed an average. You didn't assume,
Well, it was, for that purpose, it was a unisex table, a 2012 table with mortality improvement projected out 15 years.
Okay,
So-
but
so it
you
probably-
didn't place in a set-aside for additional risk as a result of it, right? So,
Yeah, I mean, for a display like that, it's a single point in time. That's an average calculation. Probably the implicit life expectancy is probably 20 years past retirement.
okay.
Representative Mottola.
Good evening. John Mottola, District 2. I should know this, but do we have separate police and fire pension funds? They're separate from, they are, okay. And then I take it all the rest of the town employees are in one pension? Okay. Have we ever looked into transferring maybe police or fire or even our town pension fund over to the municipal employment retirement system, which is run by the state? I don't know if we ever looked into that, because I work for a municipality, and at least the fire, which had its own pension, it was a defined benefit pension. They are being transferred over to the MERS, it's called, and I'm assuming that that's going to save the municipality where I work significant money. And I guess my question to you, and maybe that's something to look into, is whether or not that's something that the town of Fairfield has considered. And by your faces, I don't know if you have, but I would recommend that you maybe look at that, because I think that could possibly, depending, I don't know the specifics of our plan, but it could possibly, we could see some short, significant savings now rather than 15, 20 years down the road if we do some other type of plan. So, and I can talk to you about it after, but it's just something that I think it's worth looking into. And MERS is the municipal employee retirement system where many municipalities participate in, and it's a huge fund. And it is a defined benefit for employees, but I think the municipality gets some benefit because once the employee retires, they're not making any more contributions. That's my understanding on how it works. So at least it's something to look into.
Are all the participants in the plan subject to the... I'm sorry, quick question. If a town joins that specific plan, does the town use the benefits of that plan, or they port their own benefit design?
What my understanding is what happened where I work is that the trustees of the current pension plan, based on actuary calculations, have to transfer a certain amount of money over to the state fund. And then the active employees in that plan are now under MERS. But
is it the active employees' current design, plan design, or do they switch plan design?
They switch plans. They actually go over into
Yes,
MERS.
they switch plans.
Yeah, the MERS design is fixed, so the town would have no, the town and the employees have no discretion over what the benefit formula is
Right.
or how much the employee contributions are.
Mhm.
So, obviously it would be subject to negotiation because
Right.
there could be a difference in benefits.
Then certainly there would have to be union negotiations on something like that. But, and I don't know if it would be a good idea for Faro, but I think it's at least worth looking into. But that's all. Thank you.
I'm going to go to Representative McKenzie.
McKenzie, District 3. Can you explain to me the treatment of Social Security under the two plans? Is it the same? And I don't really know what it is.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you're, you can get out of a municipality that has its employees participating in a retirement system that meets certain criteria, does not have to pay Social Security for their employees. So if the benefits in a defined benefit plan are rich enough, or the contribution in a defined contribution plan meet a certain level, and I believe it's 7.5% in a defined contribution plan, then they don't have to participate in Social Security, assuming that that's always been the case.
And what is, on defined contribution, are we at 7.5?
Is Mary still here? Well, you currently have a defined benefit plan.
Right, but the proposed, what we just proposed
Yeah,
for
we
the
weren't
nurses,
proposing
for
anything.
example.
This was just an education on the different kinds of plan designs.
What is the plan with the nurses then? Does anybody know?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question, but maybe this was-
Apparently you don't pay Social Security if you have a 7.5% contribution by the town. Is
No.
that correct?
That's not quite correct.
Okay.
Everyone in the town currently pays Social Security, right? Except the police and fire. Yeah, so that's what I meant, the town. The town side pays Social Security. All the employees on the town side contribute to Social Security. Employees on the fire and police side do not contribute to Social Security, and I don't think you can opt out of Social Security anymore, can you?
Yeah, no, that's correct. You have to have, there was an election that the town had to make years and years ago that you could assign systems, like in the state of Connecticut, teachers are segregated, so they don't participate in Social Security. A municipality can separate it by groups, and for Fairfield, as Bob pointed out, police and fire do not participate in Social Security, but everybody else does. So, and that's typically why you see higher multipliers for public safety workers.
Yeah, and there's no longer the option of opting out.
Any other members? Representative McCarthy-Vahey, I'll let you ask a question, Representative Palmer. I'm going to have Representative Palmer first, being a member, and then you're next.
Joe Palmer, District 4. Back to the question I asked earlier regarding the 10% of pay. How does that compare? Can you maybe give us some benchmarks? How does that compare with other towns our size? Is that on the high and low end average?
It's probably, it's about average. You know, what we usually look at when we're looking at comparables is the multiplier, and then you combine that with other features, things like COLA, retirement age, but then it does, you know, it does boil down to that percentage, but as we pointed out, that percentage varies depending on what you assume for investment return. But based on your multiplier and other things, other factors in your plan's kind of in the middle to high end of the range of richness and benefits, if you want to call it that.
Okay, thank you. And just a few kind of more questions about, to help us benchmark a little bit. The age of retirement is 62. It seems that on most of the town employees in their contracts. Is that pretty standard as well around, are there trends that in moving that up to maybe 65?
There's definitely trends. I mean, actually, the more common trend is retirees are not actually utilizing those provisions. It's fairly common to have even earlier retirement ages in a municipal system. But what we're seeing when we look at the data, and that was part of the recent experience study that was done, we look at when are people going, and the trend of recent has been employees are not retiring at 62, they're going to 65, 67, so they're retiring later and later. So even if you know, that could be an instant where you change your provision, but it really doesn't have much of a cost impact because people aren't, even though it might appear rich, people aren't utilizing that particular aspect of the plan, so you wouldn't actually achieve much cost savings.
Gotcha, thank you. And I guess the last question, the mandatory contribution, I know we factor in 4% with most of the contracts. I heard 6% going around as well. Are we required, I know it's a negotiation with our unions, but you know, 4%, is that also pretty standard? You know,
Yeah, and that's another thing where when we would look at comparables, you usually tie that to your multiplier. So a town with a lower multiplier might have a lower employee contribution. So what I could say relative to your plan specifically, where your multiplier falls in the range of what we see out there in average town multipliers, and where your employee contributions, the multipliers towards the higher end, the employee contributions are towards the lower end.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Representative Ryan.
Bruce Ryan, District 10. I want to follow up a little bit on Dave's question about Social Security. I'm looking at this current nurses plan. It says that they'll be under a new plan. These are new hires for nurses, correct?
Correct.
All right, so they're going to be required to put in 4%. The town's going to match a minimum of 4%. Will those people will we have to pay Social Security for them?
Yeah, as we pointed out, you pay on all town employees other than police and fire.
So the town's 4% is going to be something like 11%. Another 7%, roughly 7.5%.
It's 6.2. Everyone, even non-Social Security, now pay. If you're hired after April 1st, '86, you pay into Medicare. So Medicare is the additional 1.6 that everyone pays.
So there's no benefit for new hires to change to a 401A plan in terms of
again, the election was a long time ago, so for all town employees, your Social Security, you know, using that 10%, the employees in the DB plan are in Social Security, so you're paying the 6.2 for them too.
Okay.
So moving to a DC, the 6.2 is paid for them either way. The thing that's changing is the town-sponsored plan. It would move from, you know, the 10% roughly cost of a DB plan to whatever the DC plan cost.
Okay. So if you were to just move this over now to police and fire, which are not in the Social Security system, and a contract for them was designed under a 401A plan, the town would not have to contribute to Social Security for them because of the election at some point? where they never made that election?
Assuming they continued to meet the requirements of providing a rich enough benefit to have the exemption.
And what is that, 7.5%?
It's 7.5%, yeah.
Okay.
But
Well,
that gets you out of doing the 6.2.
I think for people who are trying to sit here and assess whether, a move to a defined contribution plan, 401A, 401K plan, which the corporate world has adopted in the last 20 or 30 years, and municipalities are just looking at and starting to make that changeover, it's important to realize that the Social Security aspect is a big factor. If you can't do away with that, then it's still going to cost the town a lot of money to make that change on the town employee side. Now, on the police and fire side, when we're trying to assess, is this a good contract or not a good contract, the fact that we won't have to make that contribution, that's a current cost every year that's significant. So that it would make a lot of sense to understand all these little factors. That's why I'm asking that.
Yeah, a couple of quick comments. One, obviously on the corporate side, the private side, also those people are paying Social Security also.
That's correct.
But I think one of the takeaways here is when a town switches to make a BC plan optional or switching new employees into a BC plan, there is no immediate impact. There is no immediate savings. In fact, when Mr. Flynn reviewed the presentation initially, we actually didn't say that, and he said, hey, you got to throw that in there. There's no immediate savings, because you still have the current population that's getting, that the town is paying the cost of their plan, their benefits, et cetera. And now you have the new employees coming in under the DC plan, and if you remember the graph on page 13, the yellow line in the early years is higher than the blue line. So in other words, the contributions for the DC plan in the early years are higher than the contributions to the DB plan. So switching from a DB to a DC is not saving the town money. If the RTM is focused on savings, then you got to go to reducing or eliminating the COLA, or go to reducing the multiplier. In other words, instead of paying people 2.275 times every year, you got to pay them 2.2 or 1.8 or something. That's the way to have immediate impact. That's the only way to have immediate savings.
That's clear, and I think that's important for people to understand that. But one of the other big factors I think most concerns everyone in this world is unfunded liabilities. And the unfunded liability is a function of having a defined benefit plan, where it would not be a function of having a defined contribution plan. So 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, if there was a migration to a defined contribution plan, 401K, whatever, the town would be, and it was explicit in your slide as well, and that's I think the main concern of most people, and because a lot of the assumptions that you're making have certainly not borne out over the last 10 or 12 years. We've had zero growth in people's stock portfolios. 7.5 is, it's going to take another 10 years for them to catch up, and that's assuming a double return. So these are the kinds of things that we don't want to let. I know that I sit here and I think, my children or grandchildren, I don't want them subject to this issue of unfunded liabilities, which is rampant, not just potentially in the town, but the state and everywhere else. And moving to a defined contribution plan, we can begin to cure that. That's something that we all, I think, should look at. Thank you.
Any other members? Representative Brogan.
Chris Brogan, District 6. If you look at the, for example, in the nurses contract, and you look at the difference between what we would have paid for the new hires under the defined benefit plan and what we're paying under the defined contribution, is the assumption that if you put the amount in defined contribution, and all the investment assumptions and longevity and all those assumptions that go into your long-term calculations come true, that the person ends up at age 62 with the same net present value of the retirement amount. In other words, is the employee theoretically in the same position either way?
No. I mean, because you can't pay 10% versus 5.8, and if you earn the 10% has built into it the 7.5% return. Now, there's some other complexity in there, as we pointed out, with disability benefits and all that, but if you ignore that, and you say the one plan costs 10%, which means if you accumulated 10% of pay, earned 7.5%, that would fully fund that benefit. Well, if now you only pay 5.8, or what, I forget what the number was. Maybe that was the savings, and you're only paying 4%. If you're only paying 4% now, I guess, yeah, the extra was for the separate disability insurance. So maybe it's comparing 8 to 4%, but you can't, you were paying 8, you're now paying 4. You're not going to accumulate to the same benefit.
But the employee is taking the 4, investing it presumably under the same returns as your assumptions for the town.
Right. The town was investing 8. The employee is now investing 4. If they both earn 7.5, you can't get back to this. You can't pay less and have the same result.
Right. So that chart where everything met it.
That was an example to compare. That was not your plan. That was a hypothetical design where the 3 designs are designed to do what you're describing, to be equivalent.
Okay.
My understanding is, that wasn't the intent of the.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, to make ours equivalent, obviously, the town's contribution to the defined contribution plan would have to be 4.4% higher.
Yeah, I guess, put simply, you can't have equivalent benefits and save money.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to end questions. I think Selectman McCarthy, he had a comment or a question. You've been patiently waiting.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Kristen McCarthy He actually, Representative Brogan basically asked essentially what I was going to. So my comment would be, essentially, we're looking at unfunded liability issues, but also want to make sure that we're looking at it from the employee perspective as well. And certainly, the assumption from what I'm hearing for you, if we're making a 7.5% return assumption for our pension fund, you're then saying that it's also a 7.5% return assumption for the employee investing in their own 401k.
Yes.
Is that a correct statement?
Well, I mean, that's only relevant to the extent you're comparing. So if you were trying to do a comparative analysis from the employee standpoint, to tell the employees, all right, we're changing your benefit, what are you going to get out of this DC compared to the DB? You want to compare apples to apples. So, you could compare them both at 7%. I mean, it's just, the lower you assume, the more costly the DB plan is.
Sure. And the other question I had actually was in terms of fees. And was there any comparison of fee structure for what it costs are fee-wise for the defined benefit versus the defined contribution, and any fees that the employee would bear in a defined contribution plan? What were the assumptions there?
Yeah, we didn't. I mean, it was kind of a generic presentation, but we did make note of, typically how that's handled in a defined contribution plan is the fees are spread out over the investment return, so it tends to drag down the investment return, where now you explicitly pay, any fees out of the trust.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for the report. I want to leave with one final question, and that is essentially, thank you for doing this for us. I think it was in education, certainly. I think in the end, what we want to look at by contract is, is this contract more costly, or what are the costs of each contract? And I know you said specifically you can't give numbers for each one right now, but are there any lessons learned from the town here? Was this helpful for the town to do? For you, Mr. Mayor, for the first selectman? Is this going to allow you to look at contracts coming up and look at the different possibilities? I mean, is there anything gained for the town? We gained in education. We have questions. You see, there's a lot of different possibilities here. Did you guys gain anything? Going forward, that will be helpful? Because I think that was the whole point of doing this, in addition to educating us.
I think, and when you say that the town gains something, that has to be not just myself or the first selectman or the RTM, It has to be the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance as well. I mean, I think the simplest and kind of the most boring and repetition part of this presentation is the pros and cons, because each one is the flip side of the other. And so you have the issues. How much money do you want to spend? How much do you want to reward your employees? Are we worried about employee retention? Are we worried about employee recruitment? And evaluate those decisions and then come to a conclusion. I think what a lot of towns did, and I think Fairfield did the same thing, I wasn't here, but I think what a lot of towns did when the market tanked, when everybody saw their ARC going way up, said, oh my God, what do we do? And the what do we do is the corporate world does 401ks, so let's do 401as. Now, let's take a policeman, for example. Let's say that you hire a policeman. And you hire a policeman under, and let's say the town of Fairfield had a defined contribution plan. Well, in the early years, that policeman would get the benefit of that defined benefit plan, defined contribution plan, having a greater town contribution than a defined benefit plan. But then a couple years later, he can take that money out. We've trained him, we've recruited him, and he starts thinking about safety and longevity and long-term. Then maybe he might want to, it becomes more attractive to him to move to another town to get the advantage of a defined benefit plan. So there's a multiple, so for me personally, it was very informative, it was very educational, and I feel, you know, that the decisions, though, need to be held. Personally, I think the hybrid is the best way to go. You know, you have you reduce the volatility, you reduce the longevity risk, you reduce the COLA risk, you reduce the investment risk, but at the same time, you're providing the employee with those things, you know, guaranteed return, guaranteed longevity, and a little bit of COLA.
Thank you. We're going to move on to item number 3. To hear a report from the Joint Investment Board, Joint Retirement Investment Board. I think this was Bob Malarkey, am I correct?
Yes, it is.
Yes. Okay. Sure.
More retirement information for you. Thanks for having us on your agenda tonight. The scope of my report is going to actually cover about 4 different areas. The first one is a current investment policy and guidelines. You've all received a copy of that. You have yours? We've had no real changes in the past 12 months to the guidelines. We will be revising it in the spring of next year. But just to give you an idea, on pages 4 and 5, at the very bottom of page 4 and going into the top half of page 5, pretty much everything there is brand new. And it talks about our responsibility as a board, the responsibility to meeting with managers, reporting here on a regular basis. So really that's what that addresses right there. Everything else is pretty much the same. Our asset allocation guidelines are the same. And you guys all have a copy of the flow sheet, the work plan, which shows pretty much all of the work that we've been doing over the past year. We've worked at rebalancing this fund probably 10 out of our last 12 meetings. And that flow sheet that you all have kind of shows you how we've rebalanced and reallocated each of the funds, whether it's a real estate fund, alternative investments, commodities, hedge funds, the core fixed income. So we've been very dedicated. We have a great board. We have a lot of people who have a lot of financial experience. We have a great investment advisor right now. So everything is going pretty well. We're pretty accomplished at that. Moving on, you should have a copy of the investment performance over the past year. As of June 30th, The balance in the pension plan is $292,000. Million. Add 3 zeros to what I just said. We've been doing a great job. $292 million. The return from the previous June 30th, 2011, is 0.62%, under 1%. In any quarter, we may have had increases. For instance, in the next 2 months since June 30th, that plan is actually up to $299 million. So really, any quarter can speak for itself. We had a little momentum going there that kind of dropped down. Okay, so if you have any questions on that, you can hold on to those for a second. Also want to talk to you about the expenses that we've incurred. The expense report right now is incomplete. It's like the top of the agenda for our next meeting so that we can really get a good hold on what the expenses are of the fund. And then finally, the summary report on any conflicts of interest. This is one of the mandates that I should report on to you guys. Every year, we have people on the board sign affidavits disclosing whether they have a conflict of interest or not. They sign the affidavit, they have no conflicts of interest, and we have none at this point. I think that's more and more important the more we're having members of the board be in the financial community, coming out of New York City, that it's really important that everybody's pretty clean on all this. Okay? So that's pretty much my report. It's pretty quick, simple, but if you have questions, I'd love to open it up. Seeing that there are none? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ed Bateson, District 3. Quick thing, sorry, I was out of the room. The report I read, there's no dollar amounts attached to the assets. All I'm seeing is percentages. Did I miss something? Did anybody get that? Okay, is he going to give us something? I would like to see the...
We can email you the entire 140-page report.
Could you get it to the moderator, just so we could see the dollar breakdown?
Sure.
By asset class. And another quick thing to maybe Mike or whoever else. I've always had a concern about Pequot winding down. I see we still have it on there. What's the dollar amount of Pequot? And this has been going on several years. Is there a time where we finally call it quits and write that off, or we still pursue? It's been a couple of years.
We've received about 99% of that fund back.
Okay, but I still see it on there. Can you give me a dollar amount of what that is?
I can't. I will get it to you. I can't give it to you right now.
Okay.
I'll find out.
Thank you.
Yep.
Representative Ryan?
Yeah, this is what they have, just with percentages.
Ryan, District 10. Mr. Malarkey, looking at the last 5 years' performance of these hedge funds, private equity, real estate, 1.88% return, is that correct?
Correct.
For
Past
5
years.
Five
yes.
years.
Yep.
How do you think we'd be doing if we were assuming a 7.5% rate of return on our pension funds?
How do I think we'd be doing?
We'd be underwater, wouldn't we? Considerably?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, this performance is abominable.
It's pretty much, you know, it's the weakness and the strength of the fund. The weakness is the markets. The strength is how balanced it is. There's really not much you can do about any one thing unless we just, you know, dealt with high-risk portfolios where we took big risk, got big returns. But it's a public pension fund. We just can't do that. So the strength of this fund is how balanced it is right now. But I understand what you're saying. I mean, we're all feeling that.
I think the point I'm trying to make is that I think we live in a different world than we lived in for the last 30 years, that people are trying to use assumptions. I mean, I've been in the investment business for 40 years, and I know what's going on here.
Right.
And it is been a difficult time for 10 years, 12 years, or ever since the 98 run-up and subsequent crash. However, it's just unrealistic to try to look forward and assume things that worked 25 years ago or 30 years ago that haven't worked now for almost 15 years. I think some adjustment in the thinking is going to have to take place. Maybe some actuarial assumptions like 4% instead of 7.5%, and then try to come up with, okay, this is where we're really going to be at.
Yeah.
And that's just the only reason I bring that
Okay,
up.
thank
you.
All set.
Any other members? Representative McKenzie? Yeah, one more. Here, I'll give this back.
Just a quick question. I see this page on the investment manager returns. Is there something else also for U.S. stocks, non-U.S. stocks, et cetera, the other categories?
Yes. We're going to email you the entire report. The previous pages actually have dollar amounts, domestic equity, international equity, domestic fixed, and all of the alternative investments are all listed here on the previous page. For purposes of this meeting, we just made a copy of the investment return. But we can get that. We can
So
get
more
that to you.
coming.
Yep.
Okay, because it's the largest share of the portfolio.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Any other members? Representative Garskoff?
How do you get it back in there?
Josh Garskoff, District 5. Just a quick question. How many pages did you say you were going to email us?
It's about a 140-page document.
Would it be possible to get a summary that would be less than 140 pages?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll get you the flash report.
Thank you.
Yeah, the reason we got you this is because it's the past 12 months. That's our responsibility, is to give you the rate of return over the past year, fiscal year. But if you'd like to see the flash report, we'll get you that copy. It's only 3 pages. No problem.
Other members? Okay, thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to Representative Becker.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. David Becker, District 1. I'd like to make a motion to move items number 7 and 8 up ahead of item number 5.
So motion is to waive the rules to move items 7 and 8 to take them up now. Is there a second? Representative Lee? We need 2/3 vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Abstentions? Okay, so now we'll look at item number 7. To hear, consider, and act upon the following appointment to the Solid Waste and Recycling Commission. As recommended by the Board of Selectmen, Wendy Brandt Martinez, unaffiliated, 684 Catamount Road, term November 2008 to 2012. Sorry, hold on a second. To fill the vacancy created by the resignation of Mark Patton, who is here with us today. I have to look for my report. All the votes. This was referred to all committees. Do I have a motion to approve? Representative Mottola, a second. Representative Marks. Hold on one second. With the shuffling of all these papers, I have to find something. This is not good. No, I have my whole, I think someone picked it up. Who just walked out? Yeah, he probably think he walked out with everything I need. Well, I may be winging it now. I think he just walked out with my entire set of papers. Well, I can't read committee reports, but, okay. So if you are all okay without the committee reports, we can move on to discussion. So we're going to discuss this item. I'll open it up for discussion. Representative Mezhoff?
I'm Amy Mezhoff, District 4. Sorry, I'm a little bleary-eyed after all this discussion about money. Because you either got it or you don't. I talked to a number of people about appointments to commissions in general. And I think that, you know, that people who volunteer for the positions that are published in the paper, I think it's laudable that people want to participate. In this instance, I have to say that I'm a little concerned about Ms. Martinez coming to the committee meeting on Tuesday and not being able to. She had these questions, the questionnaire that you all saw. And a number of questions were asked of her again, and she really hadn't progressed much in terms of finding out what the job was about, reading the written description, potential conflict of interest, the mission of the commission, and so on. She misnamed the chair of the commission. My point here is that these are important positions in this town. Because someone volunteers for it, I think that's a good thing. But I also think that there has to be an accountability and that we have to be sure that we have the right people entering these positions because they're on commissions for a long time. And if the work needs to be done, it needs to be done by people who do their homework. And I am, unfortunately, I don't mean to be singling any one person out, but I think we have to take into account very seriously the answers that we get to the questions on the questionnaire and the resumes that we get. So I am, personally, I'm going to vote no on this one. Thank you.
Okay. Representative Stamler? Yes.
I may be recalling incorrectly, but I believe, in fact, the candidate had updated her answers to the questions. And as confirmed by the joint session minutes, she did indicate that her answers to questions 3 and 5 and 7, which had been no in the original questionnaire, were now yes. So I think on that score, at least, the candidate did show she was responsible.
Representative Richmond?
Carolyn Richmond, District 1. I'm also Secretary of the Education and Recreation Committee. We met in a joint session with Public Safety and Health on Wednesday night, and the candidate did not appear before our committee, so we did not have the opportunity to ask any questions or to get any clarification. And I think that's what our concern was because we had set forth, you had set forth the recommendation that all candidates, all volunteer candidates, either go to the 2 committee hearings, or if they can't do that, that they come to the meeting so we have the opportunity to question them. And our 2 committees did not have that opportunity.
Okay, First Selectman Tetra wanted to mention something. I'll also say, I mean, clearly you have the option of approving or denying, but there's also, you can postpone if that's, you know, that's always an option as well.
Yeah, just quickly. It's difficult, and I can understand Representative Metzoff's issues if you don't know somebody. But having had a chance to work with Wendy for close to 10 years, she's very committed to the environment, she's very committed to conservation, she's very interested in helping out the town and participating in this. With our volunteers, we specify, as Representative Richmond did, we ask them to come, we specify ahead of time that they need to come to either both committee meetings or the meeting tonight for the RTM. That doesn't quite fit everybody's schedule. So I would suggest if the intent of the body is to have that fulfilled, then just postpone this item to another time when she can make it. So we move on. But in terms of having somebody committed, she's somebody that wants to put in the time, is very knowledgeable in this area. If you look at her business practice, she has spent time getting certified in, green initiatives, that type of thing. She volunteers in other private or nonprofit issues. So I wouldn't question her commitment. Her work schedule may not allow her to be here tonight.
Representative Garskoff.
Josh Garskoff, District 5. I think my experience from last Tuesday, that I think we're adjusting to the new questionnaires, and I think we as a body or as committees might want to think about asking people to, even though we have the questionnaire, we have it in writing, it might be beneficial for us to come up with a procedure where we get the people talking more. And I think that we own a little responsibility, not so much on this one, but in general last week, of not really adjusting yet to our new procedure. So I think we're kind of growing into this new process with the questionnaire, and I think it's all for the better, but we need to adjust to it. And with that, I would propose that we postpone this till next meeting.
Is there a second? Representative Dean, discussion on the motion to postpone. Representative Jacob.
Ellen Jacob, District 9. I think it's pretty clear cut. I really don't want to drag this out. I do think that I have to agree with Amy and Carolyn that she did have several opportunities, and pretty much all the candidates that I've seen this year have managed to comply with these simple requests. The questions are not difficult. It's not brain surgery. And I do hope that we can vote on it tonight, and let's find a suitable candidate.
Anyone else on the motion to postpone? Representative Patton.
Mark Patton, District 7. Speaking as the person who Wendy is potentially going to be replacing, and I don't know how many of you have sat in those shoes where you've before you've maybe been on this body where you've been attempted to be appointed to a commission. As we all know, when we grill these candidates, sometimes it can be rigorous, and I can from firsthand experience know when I was in her shoes over a year ago. 2 years ago, that I was unprepared, and one committee meeting I felt I embarrassed myself, and the other one I thought I hit a home run. So, and it wasn't because I wasn't qualified. Wendy is passionate about the environment, and it's not like this commission is not necessarily like the TFC. You don't necessarily have to have environmental experience. Being on the commission, you have to understand the issues that are in the town. You have to understand how recycling works and the new programs that are in place and contracts that might be coming up. When you go to these, our committee hearings, sometimes, whether it's you're not sure that or you're unsure that you're going to be grilled as harsh as you are, or the questionnaires. Anyway, my point is that I think we should give this person another chance to come to our main RTM meeting and to answer some questions, because I think possibly on at least certain commissions, I don't think we stress enough how important it is for those candidates to come to the committee meetings and here, because maybe they just think it's not as important. They think, well, I'm volunteering and that's good enough, but a lot of us feel that it's not. So I recommend that we do postpone this till the next time.
Any other members on the motion to postpone? Members of the public on the motion to postpone? We're now going to have a voice vote on the motion to postpone item number 7 to the next regular meeting, which is October 22nd. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Please raise your hands. You want me to read them off? You want me to do roll call? Would it be easier? Betsy, I can read them off in about 10 seconds, hopefully. Representative Bateson, Representative Schwartz, Representative Marks, Representative Sundman, Representative Carey, Representative Braun, Ferentz, Representative Meyer, Representative Smay, Lee at the last minute, Representative Walk, Representative Mezoff, Representative Jacob, and Representative Pontrelli, Representative Ambrose, Representative Hopkins. Matt. Oh, Representative Marmion, I'm sorry. And Hopkins. Abstentions? Majority vote is needed to postpone this item. Okay, that motion passes 30 to 15. Will be on next month's agenda. Item number 8, to consider and act upon the following appointments to the Town Facilities Commission as recommended by the Board of Selectmen. Nicholas F. Caruso, Republican, 32 Nutmeg Lane, term July 2012 to 2016. Edwin G. Hill, unaffiliated, 80 Potters Lane, term July 2010 to 2013, to fill the vacancy created by the resignation of James R. Pesci. Terry F. Leopold, unaffiliated, 146 Coleman Road, term July 2011 to 2014, to fill vacancy created by the resignation of William J. Sapone. And Howard Rosenbaum, unaffiliated, 151 Wilton Road, term July 2011 to 2014, to fill a vacancy created by the resignation of James G. Gallagher. Are these 4 individuals here by chance? If you are, could you just raise your hand? We have 1 individual. And which? Can you state your name? Okay. Mr. Rosenbaum is here, just so everyone knows. This item was referred to all standing committees. I'll go over quickly the votes. At L&A, vote was all 7 in favor. Finance, vote was all 8 in favor. Public Works and Planning, vote was 6 in favor and 1 abstention. I don't know who that abstention is because I don't have the minutes. Public Health and Safety, all 6 in favor. Education and Recreation, no vote was taken as there was no quorum. We'll now have discussion among the body. Is there any discussion among the body? Is there any discussion among the public? Okay, we are now going to vote on item number 8, which is collectively these 4 individuals to the Town Facilities Commission. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Please raise your hand. Abstentions? Representative Pontrelli. Congratulations, everyone, and particularly Mr. Rosenbaum, for attending tonight. Thank you for serving. We now go back in time to item number 5, to hear a report on the status of the Chief Fiscal Officer, and I believe that is the First Selectman.
All right, thank you for the opportunity to provide an update on the current status of our Chief Fiscal Officer and some recent events. I'd like to take a few moments to review what has taken place, the role of the First Selectman, the settlement agreement, and some next steps. As First Selectman, It's my responsibility to make every effort to have all of our departments functioning at their best, both in addressing today's needs and in looking to the future. The First Selectman must provide the leadership and the vision to continually advance our town by improving service levels and planning for the future. According to our charter, it is the role of the First Selectman to direct the administration of all departments and officers. The charter goes on to state that the Chief Fiscal Officer is appointed by the First Selectman and is responsible to the First Selectman for the performance of his duties. The First Selectman is charged with evaluating that performance. During the past year, I've had an increasing number of concerns, and while the specifics of those need to remain confidential, I did reach the conclusion that it was in the best interest of the town to consider making a change. Personnel decisions are the most difficult. I initiated discussions with Mr. Hiller, and after some deliberation, we came to a mutual agreement that he would leave his position approximately 4 years earlier than he'd planned and under the terms of our settlement agreement. The non-disparagement clause included in this agreement has limited this discussion and has caused a certain amount of turmoil. Looking back and appreciating that, and given some of the questions that has led to, I can't imagine the circumstances that would lead me to assign another such clause in an agreement, but it is in this one. It was put in by the attorneys, and it was represented and counseled to me that this was a standard clause that appears in this type of settlement agreement. And just to clarify, for each of the steps in this process, I sought the advice of outside legal counsel to confirm that everything I did was proper and legal. And it was based on this advice that I asked Mr. Hiller to remain on leave while we conducted these discussions. I am sorry for any innuendo or rumor that was generated by this administrative leave. But with respect to the question of authority of the First Selectman, I not only reached out to outside legal counsel to make sure we had an independent opinion, I also asked our town attorney to review the approach and confirm he was in agreement. The First Selectman is the chief executive of this town. As mentioned before, the Chief Fiscal Officer is appointed by the First Selectman and is responsible to the First Selectman for the performance of his duties. The settlement agreement is a document that memorializes the terms of the separation. It incorporates the existing benefits that the CFO already has under the benefit summary. And based on legal counsel's advice, the settlement agreement does not require approval from any board beyond the First Selectman. Nonetheless, we've discussed this extensively at both the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen, and a motion to approve this agreement is placed on the next agenda for the Board of Selectmen. There have been several objectives in this settlement agreement. One was to allow new leadership for the Chief Fiscal Officer position. A second was to provide for a smooth transition. A third, recognizing the long tenure Mr. Hiller had, was to provide the ability for him to explore other options. An additional goal was to maintain a professional relationship with Mr. Hiller after he left. This agreement arranges for his assistance on future matters if we have any pending legal suits that come up that reference his time and tenure with the town. And lastly, our goal was to minimize any costs or legal exposure for the town. We were able to accomplish this in a mutually agreeable settlement. Mr. Hiller signed this agreement after the review and advice of his attorney. Looking at the settlement agreement, 1, Mr. Hiller's salary remains the same through the end of December, and thereafter it decreases. 2, upon Mr. Hiller's resignation as CFO, Bob Mayer becomes acting CFO. Mr. Mayer has a background and skills to perform the role. He is a CPA. He has extensive experience as a CFO in the private sector and has served over 6 years on Fairfield's Board of Finance. Mr. Mayer will coordinate the work assignments with Mr. Hiller to ensure all the work is completed in a smooth and orderly fashion. He will continue to function as Chief of Staff with no change in compensation. I did negotiate a flexible work schedule for Mr. Hiller. I specified a minimum but not a maximum number of days per week. This allows for a balance of work between Mr. Hiller and Mr. Mayor. I did this recognize, especially during the latter part of the year, Mr. Hiller might need some flexible time to explore other options. The benefits included in this agreement are those from the current benefits agreement with Mr. Hiller and the other department heads. He's paid for unused vacation time. Since his leaving is the result of a negotiated agreement and not of his choosing, he's due 13 weeks of severance. He's due his deferred compensation. He's due his post-retirement health insurance. He is vested in the pension program. I did negotiate a salary adjustment on his last day of work. This adjustment moves his pension level to approximately the level it would have been had he stayed another 4 years. In recognition of the time Mr. Hiller spent with town, I did not want to penalize him in the long term. Council also advised this was a reasonable compromise in the settlement. This is consistent with our town's past practice in such matters. With respect to current status and goals, Mr. Mayor is currently serving as CFO and will through the balance of this year. This approach does not require any new financial obligations and minimizes the impact on the current year budget. It also provides for a smooth transition. To focus on moving forward, I've discussed a number of goals with Mr. Mayor. Specifically, 1, looking for improved cash management systems and policies. 2, looking for improved system of analysis for our ongoing financial activities and year-end projections. 3, looking for improvements in our safety management and workers' comp management, working along with our Human Resources Department. 4, looking for improved efficiencies and the use of technology to help us better control costs. 5, to continue to revise and expand the use of our waterfall charts for capital planning. And we have a capital planning workshop planned at the end of October, and we'll be using charts that have been considerably revised and hopefully much easier for this body and everybody else to understand. 6, to coordinate the preparation of a comprehensive 5-year financial plan for our town. 7, review and implement recommendations from the Board of Finance Subcommittee report on the Metro Center. 8, provide improved service levels to our town pension boards. And 9, establish a program for additional cross-training within the financial department personnel. In summary, it's my job to make the difficult decisions to keep our town moving forward. And significant improvement is difficult without change. I did consult with outside legal counsel to confirm my options and correct procedures under our town charter. We need to take action to address our financial challenges. We need to continue our drive to manage expenses and find new revenue sources and control our taxes. And that's just what we're going to do. Thank you for the opportunity to share these thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Tetreault. What we're going to do now, this obviously could be a discussion conceivably for hours and hours. We do have some additional business we have to get to. However, I think it's within our right to be able to ask some questions, and I think everyone, Mr. Tetreault, is prepared for that. So to create some sort of structure here so it doesn't go forever, I'm going to limit everyone for 5 minutes, and once everyone is gone, if they want to go back up again, I'll allow for another 5. But it's you here who control how late we go, and I'm going to put that structure in place. And let's just keep it flowing. Is there any questions? Representative Hurley.
Michael Hurley, District 1. Just some questions about transparency related to the whole Paul Hiller matter. First one to First Selectman Tetreault. Following the 8-1 release, and I think you went overseas, who was the acting First Selectman during that period?
Kristen McCarthy-Vahey.
Okay. Can I ask a question of Selectman Vahey? During your period as acting First Selectman, were you briefed on the matter leading up to it, or I guess during that 2-week period?
During that period, I was not appraised of what led up to that. I did attend one meeting with the attorney, but there were no discussions at that point with respect. I said during, is that better? During that time, I was not briefed as to any of the matters leading up to it. I did attend one meeting with the attorney, but there was no conversation within that.
So during your time as acting first selectman, you did participate in a meeting with an attorney about the matter? Or before?
During that time.
Was that open to the other selectmen?
As acting first selectman, I sat in on that, and with respect to anything leading up to the matter, I was, again, not briefed and specifically because this was a unique situation, and I was in an acting position, and because the other selectman was not a part of that, I, at that point, asked that I not be a part of that conversation specifically. It was not a part of the conversation.
Okay. Is Mr. Kiley here? Yes. Can I direct a question to you? Were you briefed on the matter around August 1st or during that 2-week period?
No.
Do you feel you should have been briefed?
If there was a briefing, I would answer that question with a yes.
Thank you.
Any other members? Representative McCarthy?
Tom McCarthy, District 8, through you, Mr. Moderator, to First Selectman Tetreault. By any measure, I think this is a very generous exit package, and I think to some extent you explained the terms of that structure, but in these times I'm still concerned about how rich a package this is, and I think it probably deserves another pass. In recent weeks, news has surfaced of a side letter which to some extent governs the treatment of department heads. And I've not had the opportunity to review that letter, so there's not much I can speak to. I guess my question is this: to what extent would that side letter have driven this exit package, the structure of this exit package? Because it is something we have to talk about. It is expensive, and I'm just concerned about possible precedent it may have relative to other department heads.
Specifically, there is no side letter. All right, the only letter was included in the packet with a contract, with the settlement agreement rather, and it was one of the exhibits, and that is the department head's benefit summary. That was the summary that I was handed when I came into office. That's the summary that type of summary has been around, as I understand it, for 20 to 30 years. That's been part of the process here. But the term side letter gets bandied about a lot. This was not a side letter. This is a very public agreement. Every department head gets a copy of it, and we made it available as part of this agreement, included it in the agreement, so there's absolutely no question as to what we were referring to.
Okay, was that then the driver? Or to some extent?
That department head benefit sheet defines the benefits they're owed. When Rich White retires, we don't sit back and say, well, should we pay your vacation days or not? Should we include your medical retiree medical benefits or not? Do we include you in the pension program or not? No. It's in the department head benefits. That's where it's defined. That's, in essence, where the obligation is established.
Okay. Fair enough.
Any other questions? Representative Way?
Carol Way, District 10. To First Selectman Tetreault, I have a question in connection with how a new CFO will actually be chosen. As I understand it, Mr. Mayor will be the acting CFO, as you have stated tonight. One of the things that has concerned me about this whole process, as I viewed it from afar and through the newspaper and so on, is that a chief of staff was let go in order to put Mr. Mayor into that chief of staff position, which you have every right to do. And now we have Mr. Mayor serving as chief of staff and also as acting CFO. Along with the fact that everything was so public in the way this was done, with the person who had been in the CFO position for so many years, I just think that it was a rather poor management and human resources policy to have acted in the way that you did. And my understanding when you took office was that you were really going to bring a great policy for process and for a good type of management style. And I personally was very disappointed with this. And I'd like you to comment on what the process will be now. Will there be a search committee? I realize that you have every right to appoint who you choose to appoint, but will there be something else that will take place in the process now?
Mr. Tetreault.
We will look at doing a search in the June-July timeframe as we get towards the end of the fiscal year.
Why would you not put together a search committee now?
Because we have, one, the plan was to do it then. Second, we've got both the transition taking place now, as well as a number of as I said, goals taking place. And this would be too soon in order to hire somebody in kind of a June-July timeframe.
So basically, if you are going to go through almost a full year of a transition process, are you basically just saying that it's already a fait accompli as to who the new CFO will be?
No, I am not saying that.
So ordinarily, if there's an opening, there would be a search
We
committee.
still have two people on board. Both Mr. Hill are still here and Mr. Mayor. And one of my commitments is to stay within the budget that we have.
All right, but in a hiring process, you could still stay within that budget. Correct?
That would not be possible.
I just think that it seems as though it's not the best way of going about things.
Thank you for your opinion.
Any other questions? Representative Palmer?
Joe Palmer, District 4. Through you, Mr. Moderator, to the First Selectman. I just wanted to get a confirmation of what your position is on, let's say, the removal of department heads. So you and your successors, or you believe, or the legal opinion that you received, that you and your successors have the authority to remove, for lack of a better word, a department head without any, without clearing it through any other boards, even if a settlement, even if that removal caused a settlement to happen, you still have no requirement to pass that or to clear that with another board. Is that your position? Is that the legal opinion that we have here?
My position is we follow the charter. And if you look at the charter, there are certain positions that are appointed solely by the first selectman. In that case, they're answerable to the first selectman, and any issues with termination, as the attorney offered his opinion on, are controlled by the first selectman. If for the positions that are appointed by either the first selectman and other boards, say fire chief, police chief, director of library, or the town librarian rather, or positions appointed by the board of selectmen, it would be those bodies that would be the controlling factor.
Even with a settlement, even if a settlement occurs with that removal, you feel like there's no requirement for you to pass that settlement through the Board of Selectmen or any other boards?
Okay, if you're talking about the other positions, that would depend in part on the settlement, how that came about, and what took place. In terms of this, we do have an attorney opinion that says just that, and that was confirmed by the town attorney that that's the case.
Well, a lot of people disagree with that opinion, and it's just a shame at this point that the decision was made to the appearance is that you kind of went out of your way to find a legal opinion where you didn't have to disclose this, and just even at least let your intentions known to the other bodies. And we're all reeling from issues relating to side letter agreements and the Metro Center overruns and other things that were directly related to the lack of transparency. And this just kind of feeds into that perception that town government isn't serious about transparency. And so again, plenty of people disagree with that opinion, and that's it.
And Mr. Palmer, I take issue with your comment about transparency. I've been open and transparent about every component of this. The entire settlement agreement was made available as soon as shortly after it was signed. The only part that I can't talk about is the part that's disclosed in the agreement, and I identified that up front in terms of what I can't do.
It's really more just about letting your intentions known, even just at the base level, with such an important role in the town. But then, because there was a settlement involved, and there are other instances that have been mentioned throughout these hearings that other boards were, even in executive session, shown information regarding settlements. And for some reason, this particular instance didn't go through that same process. And that's, one of the more frustrating things for most of us here.
The settlement agreement is public. So it didn't have to be discussed in private executive session. It's totally public.
It wasn't approved. There was no approval process. There was no discussion. There was no gathering ideas from the other members of the Board of Selectmen during that process. And I know that's going to happen next week, but that was done through persistency, over a period of time. So, again, there should have been involvement from the other members of the Board of Selectmen on such an important issue, especially because there was, this 2-week period that you mentioned that you were negotiating. You could have brought other people involved, and I think that's where the frustration's coming from.
Okay.
Representative Mottola.
John Mottola, District 2. It's somewhat unfortunate that some elected people in this town want to be the first selectman when our charter says we only have one first selectman, and that's Mike Tetreault. And I'd be making these comments right now if Ken Flato, Rob Bolito, or Mike Tetreault were the first selectman. The fact is that the charter authorizes the first selectman to do what he did. He followed the law. He sought legal advice. He sought legal advice from an attorney named Floyd Dugas, who is perhaps one of the best employment attorneys in the state of Connecticut. This is what I do for a living, and I know who he is, and he's extremely competent. And to suggest that the legal opinion was sought for political purposes extremely unfortunate. Because what you're doing when you say that is you are disparaging not only the office of the first selectman, but also a professional, a lawyer, who does this for a living. So, again, we have one first selectman in Fairfield, and simply put, what he did was he followed the charter, and he has the authority to do what he did. We have to remember, people, that the agreement here did have a confidentiality clause to it. And based on that, we can't talk about, the first selectman can't talk about certain aspects of this agreement as into the reasons behind why he did what he did. Moreover, the law, if you look at it, the Freedom of Information Act is an example, which is really the bellwether of transparency, which all of us like to talk about. Well, the Freedom of Information Act specifically excludes discussing personnel issues in public session. So when you take all those things into consideration, I mean, it's clear to me that the first selectman acted under his authority, he acted pursuant to the law, and he did what he thought was in the best interest of the town of Fairfield. And quite frankly, I think what he also did was he recognized the service of an employee who worked in Fairfield for 15 years. So I really think we all need to step back and look at the big picture here. Thank you.
Representative Bateson.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ed Bateson, District 3. Yeah, I got a lot of thoughts on this matter. I got some... I'd like to first go... I know we're waiting some information from... I think it was requested by the Board of Finance, the actual costs of the agreement. Has that been submitted? Do we have that yet? I'm basically looking for calculation, severance costs, payout, and how these are going to be funded. Have you submitted that to the Board of Finance yet? I remember that was one outstanding request.
The email with that list was just received the other day.
I'm sorry, the email of the request
Board
from...
of Finance was just received the other day with that list of items. We will be submitting it to them.
Okay, so you just received the request. Oh, okay. I thought I saw that. Weren't you at the meeting that night, Board of Finance? I thought they asked for it then.
They did ask, and we asked for a follow-up list to make sure that we completely
Gotcha.
complied with each of their requests. I followed up with Mr. Flynn, and I got that the other day, I believe. And Mr. Flynn, 2 days ago?
It was within the last 2 days that you got the follow-up.
Okay, thank you. I've had some experience in the First Selectman's authority into entering agreements. Mr. Mottola, I hear what you're saying. You know, the First Selectman has a lot of power, definitely, when it comes to something like this. But when it comes to settlement agreements and so forth, we have a Board of Selectmen. And I think that this is where we're going with this issue. I mean, last year, most of us who were in this room, we had Attorney Vitarelli from McCarter English. We had a long lecture that evening about the First Selectman's authority, what he can enter, what he can't, what other boards and commissions should be involved. One thing I took away from that, or a statement that he made that night that hurt me, was one of the reasons that contract last year became valid was nobody challenged it. That bothered me, because that put the onus on me to a degree that I kind of thought something was wrong, stand up and challenge it. I didn't. If somebody had challenged it, might have made a different situation. There's somewhat of a parallel to the issue we have here. I don't... What happened between the CFO and the CEO? I mean, if Mr. Tetro wanted to take the town in a different direction, I totally understand that. What resulted from that, though, was a settlement agreement. And there was dollars attached to that settlement agreement. And I think that anytime we have a settlement agreement, it has to go to the Board of Selectmen. And that didn't happen. And that's my problem with all of this. And, you know, I've watched all the meetings on TV. I've heard, you know, Town Attorney Lesser and Attorney Dugas saying it didn't need any other body's approval. I disagree. I really think it needs the Board of Selectmen approval. And I'll put it to you this way. In that agreement, the last day of the CFO's salary, it gets bumped to $155,000, which I think some people in this room have a problem with, which I do. Let's say that number wasn't 155. Let's say it was $250,000. I think the argument that the attorneys are proposing to make this a valid agreement, they would still argue that the contract is binding. Even though that money is not in the budget, all you're doing is effectively stating that that salary is $250,000 for calculations of the pension. If that was the case, I think all of us would have a huge problem, and we would challenge it. I think the principle should be the same, irregardless of the dollars attached. So I really think that, you know, it should go to the Board of Selectmen, and to, I think, Selectmen Kiley and Vahey. I applaud your efforts for the October 3rd. I really do. I think that you guys need to exert your authority on this, to get involved, to look at it, and to opine on this agreement. I mean, we consent to be governed by the executive authority. Mike, I know to administer town operations, there's a lot of responsibility. But at the end of the day, I sincerely feel that this is a settlement, and any settlement needs to go to the Board of Selectmen. How you arrived at that settlement, it's your prerogative to discuss in executive session. But I think you owe the executive body an explanation. Thank you.
That's unbelievable how you timed that. Wow. I'm impressed. You didn't want to hear that buzzer go off. Any other questions? Representative Hopkins?
Kevin Hopkins, District 7. Through you, Mr. Moderator, to the First Selectman, I'd like to ask a question. When was the agreement with Mr. Hiller finalized and executed?
Board of Selectmen meeting was August 1st, I believe. It was signed off on Tuesday evening, the night before. I'm sorry. Jeff, I'm taller than you are. The Board of Selectmen meeting, I believe, was August 1st, a Wednesday. The agreement was signed Tuesday evening.
So that would mean that this was a done deal and completed before you went away on vacation, is that right?
Correct.
All right. And there wouldn't have been anything that Ms. McCarthy-Vahey could have done about it or had to do about it while you were away, is that right? Thank you. I have another question for you, Mr. First Selectman. Is there any precedent you were following for the settlement package which you offered to, finally arrived at with Mr. Hiller?
Yeah, there are two components. One is how we typically deal with the benefits program in terms of retirees. As I mentioned earlier, when someone like a Rich White or a Tom Brown or Stan Gorzolani leave, we don't sit down and decide if they get their retirement, if they get their pension, if they get their medical, if they get their vacation days. That's defined in the benefit package for department heads. Second component was the looking at increasing the salary, how to get Mr. Hiller's pension up to what it would have been had he stayed another 4 years. In looking back, we did just that in 2009, where we had an early retirement program. We had an incentive to basically offer 3 years of additional credit towards retirement. It was done by increasing the salary on the last day of the year, and it was done 27 times that year, and it was done with the First Selectman's approval, and it didn't go before any other board.
Okay. And what did you do, if anything, to get any kind of legal assistance concerning whether or not the final agreement had to be approved by the Board of Selectmen?
I had brought Attorney Dugas in before I started the conversations. He was
Right, so that was part of that whole legal, was whether or not it had to be approved by the Board of Selectmen?
with me at
Okay.
each step of the way and helped negotiate the agreement as we went through it.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it. You know, I would just add, I think we know that here now that there is a precedent for the amount of money that was offered to Mr. Hiller. And as far as the First Selectman offering some wild, crazy amount to him, you know, I think that what keeps him from doing that is the fact that at some point he has to go back to the voters and justify what he did. So that's a check on what he's going to do, and I don't think that we have to be overly concerned about that. He followed the law, he got the legal opinions that he had to, so I think he did it right. I would also mention that personally, I'm glad that he signed a confidentiality agreement. I think that if you're an employee of the town, just because you work for a government doesn't mean that your personnel file should be open to the public. And you know, he has a right to some confidentiality, I mean, Mr. Hiller, and I think that it was just doing him a favor to keep his personnel issues private. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Walsh?
Mr. Tetro, the pension sweetener that you gave Mr. Hiller, is that in the department head's benefits package you're speaking of?
The pension program is, the exact amount that anybody retires at is not in the pension defined in the department head's benefit.
So when Mr. White just retired, did he get the exact same pension sweetener that you gave Mr. Hiller?
He did not.
Why not?
Simply put, we were negotiating an agreement and a settlement with Mr. Hiller. We did that with legal counsel's advice, and that there's a reasonable package considering our asking Mr. Hiller to leave sooner than he planned.
But you seem to be tying this 2009, this early retirement plan, that's exactly what it was, right? Because the first selectman at that time, Mr. Flato, announced that he was going to have an early retirement plan to try to save money. This is different, though, than what you offered Mr. Hiller. Because in Mr. Hiller's case, it appears that he got it because you wanted him terminated. You didn't want him there anymore. So you gave him a benefit. This isn't part of a retirement plan like an IBM offers where they have all of their employees and they give the plan, which was what Fairfield did in 2009. So to try to compare the two is not exactly being forthright, because this is a sweetener. This is kind of like a little bit of a golden parachute you're giving him, as opposed to him suing the town and to waive rights and things like that. Because you seem to be tying the two ideas together, like this, we did this in 2009, so it's okay to do it now. But that was part of a plan to try to save the town money. It was offered to everybody. Mr. White did not get that right. Mr. Hiller got it because maybe we did something wrong. Maybe we should avoid a lawsuit. Maybe we just want him out. It's different. So it's just, I don't think you're being forthright when you say that, you know, he's getting it, we gave it in 2009, so it's okay we give it now. Because I think then every employee would have the same right to ask for the same thing when they retire.
Just to clarify, Mr. Walsh, I'm being very forthright because I'm describing it fully in public hearing right here.
But you're trying... Go ahead.
Mr. Moderator, can I finish before Mr. Walsh interrupts?
Let him finish.
He can finish his answer. Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. The mechanics are the same. The approval process is the same. The authority of the first selectman is the same in both cases. That's where it's similar, and that's the past practice that we were replicating here.
But one was part of a plan for the entire town. And one was on an individualized basis that another longtime employee, one who was employed a lot longer, did not get the benefit of. And that was part of a settlement, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I heard you talk earlier, and you talked a little bit about the Board of Finance, that you're waiting until July of next year, 2013, to commence a search for a permanent CFO. Are you committed, so that the RTM and Board of Finance members and the taxpayers, to a search committee, that you're definitely going to have a search committee?
We are definitely going to do a search, correct? The goal will be to start it perhaps towards the end of the year so that on or around July 1st, we can make our selection.
Is that a search or a search committee? Are you going to set up an independent search committee to do that search, or are you just going to do your own search?
I'm going to set up a process for that later in the year. I'll be happy to update you at that time, Mr. Walsh.
Okay. That brings me to my second question. Why wouldn't we start the plan now? Because in most corporations, and even municipalities like Westport, they don't wait 9 months to start a plan. We are a AAA community. We are basically a $300 million corporation. We just got our negative outlook removed under Mr. Hiller's watch, and I think there's going to be some uncertainty in the financial markets without starting a search and getting on with the process. I think the plan is flawed to wait that long. I think it should start immediately. I don't see any reason not to. Mr. Hiller has taken a CFO position in another community, and for a week or so, he was actually the CFO of 2 communities. So I don't understand what waiting is going to get us. Being on the Board of Finance, seeing the budget coming up, how are we supposed to budget for a salary? We have no idea what we're going to be paying depending on the quality of person we get. So what are we supposed to do during the budget season for this RTM and for the Board of Finance? Why can't it start now?
That's the last question.
Okay, thank you. From the top, 1, we're staying within the budget guidelines for this year. Second, we knew that Rich White was going to retire. We knew he wasn't going to stay for the year. We knew we had to find another director of Public Works, and we went out with a salary range based on what Human Resources has identified was reasonable for that position.
The question hasn't been answered that I was asking, which is why are we waiting for a CFO position for 9 months?
Okay, answer that question.
We're not. We've got Mr. Mayor in place right now, taking care of that. We've got Mr. Hiller on board during that time period to make sure there's a smooth transition and the work responsibilities are covered. And we're waiting to find a permanent replacement until that time period, so we stay within the budget guidelines and constraints that we have right now.
Jim,
Okay, yes.
we're going to have another opportunity possibly,
Sure.
but I need to move on. Any other members? Representative Meyer?
Gaylord Meyer, District 1. I don't know about anybody else, but I'm not running for selectman or selectwoman. So I'm here at a pure principle, and I'm really disappointed that this is the forum tonight. I guess, you know, we've had conversations about process, and we've had conversations about transparency. And what has happened in the last few months is lacking, I think, in at least transparency for me. The question that I'd like to ask, in the Board of Finance meeting, your attorney and you both mentioned increasing concerns, and that is why you felt it was necessary to ask Mr. Hiller to take the package or retire. That scares me. And I think what scares me is that I don't know what those increasing concerns are. And I think as a taxpayer and as representative of District 1, I can't tell you how many people have asked me that question, which I'd like an answer to. And I'd also like to know why you did not confide in your other selectmen when making the decisions that you made. And third, why was it so necessary to seek counsel to interpret our charter? So if you could answer those questions for me, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
From the top, our charter, and certainly human resource law,
Mhm.
or labor law in this case, is more complex than for those of us that don't deal with it every day.
Mhm.
And I wanted to make sure that we did follow all the proper and legal process within that. So it seemed very reasonable to sit down with counsel and find out what the options were, how the rules work, and to make sure that we stayed within those rules.
Mhm. Why is it that you didn't confide in the other selectmen?
Simply put, the chief fiscal officer reports to me. I've been the person that has been monitoring and evaluating performance over that time period. And in stepping through the settlement agreement, when we got to that point, I realized that we would be bringing that. Simply put, we resolved that fairly quickly after a few days of discussion, and it wasn't possible to, A, hold that up, B, from a standpoint of the first selectman, you've got to make these decisions. This is what it is, and it was my evaluation that we needed to consider making a change at that point.
Well, okay, and as selectman, you can, and that's your authority, and I respect the fact that you did. I think one other quick question is that, and that goes to Rich White. When did Rich White tell you that he would be retiring?
I'm going to say March.
Okay. Another concern of many of the people in my district, including myself, is that there's a precedent that's been set here, and I think Mr. Walsh spoke to it, that I cannot understand why the rest of the employees who haven't put in 25, 30 years are not going to want the same type of package, and how that's going to affect our town and the taxpayers.
Yeah, this has not set a precedent at all in that case.
Well, I got it. No, we'll talk later. I think for me, I think this is, as I said, has been a very uncomfortable, and I think the way this was handled, for me, was not a dignified process. And as a representative of District 1, it's hard to tell my constituents what went down, because I don't have any answers. And I still don't really have a lot of answers now, but thank you.
And I can understand that, and unfortunately, with the non-disparagement clause, those are the answers that I can't address.
Why was that necessary?
The attorneys recommended it
Mm-hmm.
and identified that it was a standard component in a settlement agreement like this.
Then you can understand why people are still wanting to have the curiosities to know.
Sorry. Any other questions? Representative Becker? Motion to suspend the rules. I'm assuming Rule 36 and the RTM's rules to regulate. To continue discussion after 11:30, take on new business after 11. We need a two-thirds vote, but we need a second first. Representative Marmion, although, again, should we vote this down, then we're going to be here tomorrow night. So I encourage you to vote yes if you want to finish this up. Yes. Hmm? Why would? This is part of the agenda tonight, and so we're trying to finish the agenda. We still have items we need to vote on. So, all those in favor of waiving the rules, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Representatives Schwartz, Varian, Mottola, Patton, Connolly, and Abercrombie. Abstentions? What's that? Lee Hannum voted no as well. And Jay Walk, did you vote no? Well, let's finish the vote first. And Representative Gottlieb also voted no. The motion passes 37-8. So we're going to continue tonight. Are there any questions, Representative Becker?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. David Becker, District 1. You know, this all started in this room almost 2 months ago. We had a break last month. It was the end of our last meeting. I got up here, and I was given what I would call a pretty stonewalled answer. But at that time, when I wanted to know the status of the CFO, I never imagined that we would be here with this type of agreement, and that other things, such as be it a side letter and a department head contract, whatever you want to call it, that would have surfaced with so many things. And there's just so many layers here of transparency all along the way that have been broken. And you know, so I think what we are seeing here tonight, as we've seen at some other boards, and I think what everyone is hearing from their constituents, is a lot of concern about the transparency of what's going on. And what I want to do tonight is really, there's one area that is of particular concern because it does directly, in my view, relate to this body. And I'd like for a moment to focus on that area. And that is, again, called a side letter, called a department head contract, however it is. This body approves, as I understand it, employment contracts. We did one earlier tonight for the unions. And there is a lot of compensation that is tied up in this department head contract, if you will. And it's actually signed by somebody who also gets that level of compensation, which to me is a total lack of transparency and checks and balances at the very least. So I'm curious, we can go to the first selectman, we can go to the town attorney, we can wait a month and maybe bring some special counsel in because they're used quite a bit right now. But I want to know when that will be brought to us for a vote, and if not, why?
So you're asking if that department head benefits?
Absolutely. To me, it seems like something that should be before this body.
Yeah, again, just to be clear, it's not a side letter. It's the department head benefit sheet that has been around has been represented to me 20 or 30 years. That has been the way our town has done business for that time period. It was a sheet. It was the benefit sheet that, if you look at it on the top part, it defines that it's the first selectman and the director of human resources that have historically reviewed and approved that. From my standpoint, I haven't made any changes to that. It has typically tracked with a mid-management contract. That makes sense because if we're going to promote anybody from the mid-management ranks to department heads, that should track along the same lines. We wouldn't want any of our good mid-managers not wanting to be promoted because there was a major discrepancy in the benefit sheet. But simply my proposal was that it go before the Board of Selectmen for any changes in that. And that's what I would plan on doing going forward, especially when we look at a new mid-manager contract and kind of track it back to those benefits. Okay. Yes. Sure. If Mr. Steele, if that's okay.
Yep.
Mr. Becker, I think what your statement assumes some facts that aren't quite true. What you're talking about, this benefit sheet that the first selectman has been talking about has been in effect for a long time. And I can recall from my days 20 years ago on the Board of Finance, most of the employees in this town, their pay, their benefits are governed by contracts. And by charter, this RTM approves those contracts. But that's all that it approves. Most of the employees of this town don't have individual contracts. The police chiefs, the fire chiefs, they do have contracts for a period of years. The department heads don't have contracts, and they're not unionized. So over the years, what's happened is, in order that these people not get benefits willy-nilly, you know, one department head gets these benefits, one gets that, they become standardized and kind of codified, if you will, over the years. And that's the way things have been done. And I can recall having our chief fiscal officer, Mr. Leahy, and having the first selectman at the time talking about meeting with these department heads, going over their benefits, and as Mr. Tetro said, they did kind of follow mid-management, which were union people. They had contracts. That's why it's been done. It's been done for consistency, so that all of the department heads get the same benefits, and one doesn't accuse the town of saying, hey, this one got this and that one got that. You follow the sheet. That's what you're talking about. Now, who needs to approve it? Again, the first selectman is charged by the charter with administering all the town departments. And the first selectman, from what I understand over the years, has always done that. He meets with the department heads, he talks about their raises, he does their evaluations. But again, I don't think that this body, it's certainly beyond the jurisdiction of this body to do that, and it probably is also beyond the jurisdiction of the Board of Finance and maybe even the Board of Selectmen. It's a first selectman position for these people.
Yeah, and I can appreciate the need for some consistency across the board with the department heads. I'm not suggesting that each one should have their own. What I'm suggesting is that the first selectman, especially because of the fact that it actually deals with his compensation package, shouldn't be the one deciding on this solely. And I'm asking in more detail than it's just been done that way. And I can understand you may not be able to give me an answer like that right away, but I would like one in more detail as to why we're doing it that way, because there's a lot of things that we have come across, especially over the last 24 months, I would say, that have shown that the way things have been done are not necessarily always correct, be it right or wrong, but also legal or not, or following or not following the charter, or providing or not providing the checks and balances that are necessary. And it is my belief that someone should be reviewing that, and it should not be, actually, quite frankly, also a board of selectmen, because the first selectman sits on that board and it deals with his comp. And again, the RTM consistently deals with contracts, which I believe this falls under.
Okay.
All
Sorry.
right. Thank you.
Other questions? Representative Stamler.
Mr. Moderator, is it appropriate to make a comment without a question?
Sure.
Thank you. First of all, I would just like to comment on the last comment. I believe, to his credit, this first selectman has brought to the town's attention some issues that were not standardized in the past and has attempted to standardize them. I can't itemize at the moment, but that is my impression. Meanwhile, I just wanted to comment that based on every discussion of this issue, from the first announcement in August through today, I believe the first selectman acted in good conscience and in what he believes are the best interests of the town. He determined that the town would be well served by new fiscal leadership, and he did what we expect every elected official to do, which is follow procedure. In fact, he went out of his way to be sure he was following procedure. But there's something else that I think needs commenting on. A sign of character, in my opinion, is how a person faces adversity. And over the past 2 months, we have seen our first selectman face intense and sometimes even hostile criticism, one-on-one and publicly over and over again. He has listened to every question and attempted to answer even if it was answered before. He has not shut the door to any inquiry he is legally permitted to entertain. He has listened to criticism of his choices tonight and earlier, including from the present speaker. He has set forth his reasoning in this matter, admitted some poor choices, and promised to make better ones in the future. That takes courage, especially in today's political world. Throughout, he has maintained the dignity of his office, treating every individual with respect, never getting personal, and keeping the door open to continued discussion. I thank and applaud our first selectman for the character and integrity he has shown.
Is there anyone who hasn't asked a question who wants to ask a question? Okay. Are there any follow-up questions? Representative Ferentz.
Hank Ferentz, District 3. Oh, thank you, Al. All right, Hank Ferentz, District 3. Mr. Tetreault, this is a comment, and my comment is that personally I am very disappointed with the lack of transparency on this issue. As a member of the legislative body of this town, I think that I think that we owe Mr. Hiller an apology for the unprofessional way that this matter was handled, and I personally would like to apologize to Mr. Hiller. Thank you.
Any other questions? Any follow-up questions? Okay. We're going to move on. We're going to go to item number 9, which is to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Board of Selectmen. Resolve that Michael Tetreault, First Selectman of the Town of Fairfield, is empowered to execute and deliver in the name and on behalf of the Town of Fairfield a contract with the Connecticut State Library for an historic documents preservation grant. Representative Garskoff makes the motion to approve. Representative Schwartz seconds. Committee votes, L&A, all 7 in favor. Actually, everybody was in favor, all around. No vote was taken, Education and Rec. We're now going to have discussion among the body on item number 9. Hearing none, any discussion from the public on item number 9? We're now going to vote on item number 9. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Item number 9 passes. Item number 10, to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Board of Selectmen. Resolve that in accordance with a request from the Director of Community and Economic Development, the Fairfield Center Improvement Plan be and hereby is approved. And further resolve that the First Selectman be and hereby is authorized to submit an application under the Main Street Investment Fund Program as referenced in Section 78 and 79 of Public Act 11-1 to execute documents necessary to facilitate the town's participation in said program and to administer any grant funds provided in connection therewith. Referred to all standing committees, may I have a motion to approve? Representative Smay, second. Representative Mirabili. Now go over committee votes. L&A vote was 3 in favor and 4 abstentions. Bateson, Becker, Braun, Stamler. Finance vote was all 8 in favor. Public Works and Planning vote was all 7 in favor. Public Health and Safety, 5 in favor, 1 abstention, Representative Pontrelli. Ed and Rec, no vote was taken as there was no quorum. Their discussion among the body on item number 10, Representative Bates.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ed Bates in District 3. In joint committee on Tuesday night, I had a problem with the fact that it appeared to be that the RTM was being charged to approve the Fairfield Center Improvement Plan, which is something I didn't think was appropriate for us. Mr. Barnhart followed up with some discussion with the First Selectman and Town Attorney, and they were in agreement. So out of that conversation I have an amendment as follows. In the first resolved, after the word development, strike the comma, the Fairfield Center Improvement Plan being hereby is approved, and in the second paragraph, strike further resolved, comma, that. So the amendment will read as follows. Resolved that in accordance with the request from the Director of Community and Economic Development, the First Selectman being hereby is authorized to submit an application under the Main Street Investment Fund Program as referenced in Sections 78 and 79 of Public Act 11-1 to execute documents necessary to facilitate the town's participation in said program and to administer any grant funds provided in connection therewith.
Is there a
That's
second
it.
of this amendment? Representative Garskoff, discussion on this amended language. Hearing none, is there any comment from the public on the amendment? Hearing none, we're now going to vote on the amendment to strike the words, "The Fairfield Center Improvement Plan be and hereby is approved," and further resolve that. So, all those in favor of this amendment, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The amendment passes. So now we're back at the original, or at the new statement, which reads as Mr. Bateson read, and I'll at least read just the first sentence again. Resolve that in accordance with the request from the Director of Community and Economic Development, the First Selectman being hereby is authorized, et cetera, et cetera. Any discussion on this new version? Representative Hurley.
Michael Hurley, District 1. I support this revitalization program. I think it's very important. But I do want to make a note. I mean, there are other areas in town. I know in Southport, where I represent, the area on Post Road really is in desperate need of rehabilitation. When you enter the area, I see the First Selectman nodding, so I know that he acknowledges that, and we've spoken about that before. And I've spoken about it with Mark, too, so I just want to keep that in mind. Thank you.
Any other comments? Representative Sundman?
Eric Sundman, RTM, District 1. Through you, Mr. Moderator, could I ask Mr. Barnhart a question?
Sure. Mr. Barnhart? Go ahead.
Mr. Barnhart, I was just curious, with this, the improvements here. I came across, I thought it seemed a little subjective, like, what was going to be going on. And I was just wondering how flexible can this program be? Like, to Mr. Hurley, to his point, for instance, Post Road in Southport, by the Athena Diner, Hulls Highway, that whole thing is a mess. I would put that at a higher priority. Is there any kind of way that we can address this funds to a plan over there, now, or?
Mark Barnhart, Director of Community Economic Development. We would need to first develop a plan for that section of the Post Road in Southport, and then have that plan approved by the governing body of the municipality in order to apply for these funds. And simply put, the only portion of town that had a plan in place was Fairfield Center that we could readily get the governing body, the Board of Selectmen, to approve in the short time period that we had in order to submit an application. And so the intent of this application is simply to extend the existing streetscape, which would mean new curbing, new walks, new lights, further south in the direction of Southport. But I think, the comments made by Mr. Hurley before and yourself are well put. That would be another area. There are several areas in town that I think are deserving of attention. And we would need to then work with a number of stakeholders, perhaps this body, but obviously the Planning and Zoning Commission and others, to develop a plan that would then be endorsed by the governing body of the municipality in order for us to apply for a subsequent round of funding.
What type of time frame would something like, I know that this isn't germane to it, but I was just curious because it'd be great to have some improvement there.
Well, just to give an indication, the Planning and Zoning Commission went through a planning process involving the Commerce Drive area, and that was about a 2-year planning cycle. Now, I think that might have been a very robust process. Perhaps we can cut that down, but obviously we couldn't accomplish a planning process in a couple months' time. But I would think a year would give us adequate time to develop a plan for other parts of town.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Representative Pontrelli.
Carol Pontrelli, District 9. In my judgment, by approving this grant, we are also assuming the acceptance of all of the budgeting, planning, risk, and execution phases of a $500,000 project. And based on the submission to the RTM, we have a cost budget which is at best a high-level summary, and as such it is just slightly better than vague. It isn't right to approve a $500,000 spending proposal which is supported by a largely vague budget. And also by approving this budget, even though I know we've just separated the economic development plan, we are still assuming acceptance of the reason for this application, which is the town's economic development plan. And this economic development plan is the 1984 plan, which has been edited to remove outdated references. So really the plan isn't actually a current and explicit 2012 plan. Also, given the current planning by outside developers to pursue high-density housing, and even in this downtown area, the town's 2012 plan should include the intent for restricting or permitting, in other words, making explicit the plans for high-density planning. And without that in the plan, we don't know the full meaning and purpose of the plan. So because the supporting budget and economic development plan do not provide adequate detail for planning and no risk assessment, as I explained, I'm voting no.
Representative Garskoff.
Josh Garskoff, District 5. I was going to ask Mr. Barnhart a question, so he's walking the other direction. But we're not approving a budget or a expense here, are we? We're requesting money, I think. Am I right about that?
You're simply authorizing the submission of a grant application. That's it.
So if we're lucky enough to be granted the money, then there would be a budget and a more specific plan put together?
We would have to develop construction plans and documents and put it out to public bid as part of this process.
And if it's not approved, if we don't get the money, what would be the next step?
If we don't get the funds, I guess we can try again. If we did receive less than what we had requested, we would obviously have to rescope the project to keep within the funds that were permitted. And even after we put it out to bid, if for some reason that the estimates, the engineer's estimates which were prepared, proved insufficient, then we would also have that choice to make before we couldn't let a contract for more than we have funds available to do the work.
Thank you. One more thing. I know you're trying to get away. Is anything in this proposal, would it change the ability of anyone to do any development downtown? Would it change the approval process or the ability of somebody to build a certain type of building downtown?
The application is for new walks, curbing, lights to extend the existing streetscape further south, and that's all the application amounts to.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Representative Braun, come on down.
Through you, Mr. Moderator, to Mark Barnhart again. I'll keep it crisp. When we were at committee, you had mentioned that you really didn't do much outreach along the post road. I know I have a business on the post road, and no one ever came to our office asking if we needed help. I'm on Lantern Hill. Who did you speak to in terms of deciding where this $500,000 would go if it's approved?
Again, we didn't have a whole lot of opportunity to do any extensive outreach with the business community. That would be in a subsequent phase as we move forward with this and develop more concrete plans. In terms of discussions, I obviously consulted with the First Selectman's office to make them aware of the fact that there's a possibility to receive funding under this program. Of course, pointing out that there were some prerequisites, criteria that you had to have a plan that was already approved by the governing body. That pretty much narrowed down the search to the Fairfield Center area that was part of the 1984 plan that was referenced earlier tonight.
Might as well stay up here. The 1984 plan does go quite a long distance. It goes, the primary target area for improvement was from Beach Road on the west to Bungalow on the east. I'm talking about the south side. And the secondary target area was from the traffic circle at McDonald's to the Mill Hill Railroad overpass. So that's a pretty long way. And my thought is, you were basically using this plan as the starting off point, but did you talk to any merchants or vendors or even residents between the traffic circle and Mill Hill Road to get input? And what was the emergency? When did this RFP come out from the state, or request for grant?
The answer in terms of talking to people further north, no. We did, obviously, I did talk to the Economic Development Commission in addition to the First Selectman's office. With regard to the emergency, we just have a limited period of time in which to apply for the funds. I think we were notified over the summer and basically we have to apply before September 28th, which is the end of this week. So we had about 2 to 3 months to put a plan in place and an application to request the funds, and obviously had to work through the legislative process as well in terms of getting the authorization.
Did the Economic Development Commission vote, or was this purely your decision? I think you told us at committee that this was basically your decision on how to put this budget together in terms of picking the two areas, one by Exide and the one basically Thorpe, Bungalow, and down to South Pine Creek. And you had told our committee that it was because you were aware of economic development proposals going in those two areas.
I think that was one of the factors that informed the decision to look at this particular area, was the knowledge that there was potentially some properties or parcels, not particularly in the area that we're actually applying for the funds, but further south, that would be likely subject of redevelopment in the next few years. So if we had a plan in place, we might be able to work with the private property owners and have them match or mirror the type of improvements that we're looking for in terms of streetscape enhancements. The other thing I think I mentioned to committee was that I was aware of the fact that the Planning and Zoning Commission was very interested in looking at ways in which they could extend the Center Design District further south towards Southport. So I thought that that might be a potential tie-in as well. But I think we looked at where we had stopped the existing streetscape motif and where we could extend it within the $500,000, which was the maximum grant application. So talking to the town engineering department, public works department, we had determined that going from approximately the Thorpe Street intersection further south to South Pine Creek was about as far as those funds would reasonably take us.
Thank you. No one wants to turn down free money, and this is just my opinion on this. I think more research should have been done. I think at least some merchants along the post road should have been requested for where we could use the money. It's $500,000, about half of which would be targeted towards the Thorpe Street area, which could actually help the development of a high-density housing proposal that's currently wending its way through the various land use boards in the state and the town. And I just think that if we're going to ask the state to spend $500,000 of public funds, we should do a little bit more research, talk to people. Don't just say we have this 1984 plan and now we've got to just, rely on it. And by the way, the 1984 plan would have allowed research or outreach all along the post road. Thank you.
Any other comments? Representative Dean.
Mr. Moderator, through you to Mr. Barnhart. I'm so sorry. I should have told you to stay up here. With regards to this grant, what is the likelihood of us receiving it?
Well, I'd like to say it's in the bag, but I think that it's a very competitive application process. There's $5 million available statewide. There's a number of communities that will be applying for those funds. The maximum grant award is $500,000. I think at the committee level, I expressed some pessimism. I think it's, obviously we think we have a shot, otherwise I wouldn't be here asking for your support, but it is a competitive process.
With regards, if we were to receive this money, it would cover all of the costs of what you have for your plans. Is that correct?
We have no other source of appropriation, so we'll have to, yes.
Mr. Barnhart has always proven himself competent and pragmatic, especially given his experience to step up and manage large projects. I'm confident that he has thought out the grant request to the betterment of Southport, and I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Hearing none. Any discussion? We can't do that until we go to the public, so. Representative Jacob? Okay.
Ellen Jacob, District 9. I have to just make one final statement myself about the concern that we need to be careful what we develop, where we develop, what kind of public support is behind it. It does alarm me a little bit that it is possible, even though well-intentioned, that there could be some unintended consequences of this lovely plan, really to extend the streetscape. It is possible that it could ease the way for, through the town planning and zoning, by enhancing some of the traffic congestion, or preventing it, helping the infrastructure, and paving the way for more of these high-density residential development applications. It's causing a lot of public outroar and uproar, and I do want to just say a word of caution. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Any members of the public wish to make a comment? State your name and your address, please.
Donald Peterson, 1061 Galloping Hill Road. I'm a member of the Economic Development Commission, and we support this grant application.
Thank you. Any other members of the public? Any other members of the body? We're going to vote on this item number 10. I'm not going to read it again, but it's item number 10 in the amended version, as Representative Bateson has amended. If anyone needs me to read it again, I will. Okay. We're going to do a voice vote. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Representatives Jacob, Mezoff, Pontrelli. Did I get everybody? Abstentions? The item passes. 41-3, 42-3. How many people we have here? 42. So 39-3. Moving on to item number 11, to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Board of Selectmen. Okay. This item was referred to all standing who made that motion? Representative Schwartz, Representative Dean, second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? This item was referred to all standing committees. Motion to approve this item. Representative Mottola, second. Representative Lee. Committee votes, LNA vote was all 7 in favor. Finance vote was 7 in favor, 1 abstention. That'd be Representative Peter Ambrose. Public Works and Planning vote was all 7 in favor. Actually, Mr. Ambrose is left for this vote. Public Health and Safety, all 6 in favor. Ed and Rec, no vote was taken. We'll now have discussion among the body on this item. Any discussion? Well, can't do that quite yet. We would all like to move everything. If I could create a motion to do that, I would. Any other discussion? Public? Okay, we're going to go to a vote on item number 11, which I will not read. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The item passes unanimously. Move on to item number 12. Second, Representative Dean. All those in favor of waiving the reading, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Item number 12. And by the way, I do want to mention that Joseph Michelangelo, is he still here? Yes. You've waited very patiently for this item, but I want to mention we have our new Public Works Director. I'd like to welcome him. We look forward to working with you. And I think this is your first full meeting, and what a doozy it is, 11:30. So I can say they're not all like this, but they can clearly get this late. They're not all like this. I'm not gonna lie. Okay, item number 12, all standing committees. So I have a motion to approve. This is regarding the Clean Energy Fuel Grant. Representative Richmond, Representative, I get you all the time. Representative Ryan. Discussion on on number 12. Representative Richmond.
Carolyn Richmond, District 1. I did want to mention one thing because we had a member of the Human Services Commission here, Nancy Legary, and she had to leave due to the lateness of the hour. But in speaking with her concerning the plans for the senior center, that she wanted to let everyone know that next Thursday they will be discussing the community survey that they have taken. They're putting together long-term projects. I asked her about the bus in particular, and that they do need a smaller vehicle to take the people the seniors that are using it, and that they are putting together a full plan, but that has not been done yet, which is one of the questions our committee, Education Recreation, had asked. Before we are asked to approve something, what is the context in which this request is being asked? And we were told that, they're asking, this is simply approval to go for a grant. If it's determined that this is not the appropriate vehicle, then we get the grant, we don't have to use it. But I did want you to know that the senior center, and it'll be at 4 p.m. next Thursday, they're starting to put together a long-term project of needs for the senior center. But they do need a smaller vehicle. Thank you.
Any other comments on item number 12? Any comments from the public on item 12? Okay, we're going to go ahead and vote on item number 12, the 2012 Clean Energy Fuel Grant. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The item passes unanimously. Item number 13, to hear, consider, and act upon the following, and thank you for coming, Mr. Michelangelo. I'm sorry you didn't get to say anything or answer any questions, but maybe that's for the better. Okay, that's true. We're not done. To hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Board of Finance, resolved that a 2011 $100,000 Small Town Economic Assistance Program, STEEP grant, be and hereby is accepted in order to install permanent canopy structures over and restore the staircases at Fairfield Center train station. And further resolve that First Selectman Michael Tetrell be and hereby is authorized to apply for and execute the grant agreement and accept the funds for the project. It's referred to all standing committees. Do I have a motion to approve? Representative Mottola, second. Representative Brogan. Committee votes. L&A vote was 6 in favor, 1 abstention. That was Representative Hopkins. Finance, all 8 were in favor. Public Works and Planning, all 7 in favor. Public Health and Safety, all 6 in favor. Ed and Rec, no quorum. Is there discussion on this item? Representative Hurley.
Michael Hurley, District 1. I used to be on the Parking Authority, and I worked on the survey that the new DPW director talked about. And the stairs have been a long-term issue at the train station. I think it's a pretty important project. I sat on the train this morning with Mary Kay Frost, who was here earlier, and she did want to speak, but she had to leave because of time requirements. But one question for the DPW director. The warranty on the canopies? And then who would be responsible for replacing the canopies? Is that town or parking authority?
I believe it would be the parking authority. It's their space, and typically the work we've done on the stairs, that type of thing in the past, has been paid for by the parking authority, even though we've used DPW labor to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Hearing none, any members of the public? Okay, we're going to vote on item number 14. 13, steep grant for $100,000 for the train station. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The item passes unanimously. And now item 14. Schwartz, Dean, all those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Committee votes. Could have already read them by now. Same people for, make the motion second. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Is there any discussion? Item number 14, Jennings Beach, handicapped access. Any comments from the public? We're now going to vote on item number 14. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Abstention? The item carries. I got to read item number 15. You didn't waive that one. This part's important. Consider and act upon any matters presented at said meeting which may be properly acted upon under the rules of representative town meeting. Hearing none. The next meeting will be held on October 22nd. That was the important part. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Representative Dean, a second. Representative Mezoff. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Sundman? Why? I just will never know, but let's leave it at that. Thank you, everybody.